Welcome to this meeting of the regular school committee meeting of Thursday, September 13th, our first meeting of the new school year. Is there any public participation?
Yes.
Okay. Okay, so for public participation, you get 3 minutes, and we can delay it if we don't respond to what you say, but we listen, and we may bring it up at later in the meeting or at a future meeting. So Karen Barrett.
We don't have enough for everybody, so I'm going to ask you to share. But we have a handout just to help what we're talking about. My name is Karen Barrett. I have 2 children at the Bishop School, and we're here today because we've spoken with both our principal and the teachers, and we've realized that Bishop has really high enrollment and that a lot of our classes are really large. So as you pass this handout out, the cover is kind of a summary of some of our thoughts. This year, the Bishop enrollment increased by 40 people over last year. And we know that there's an overall issue everywhere, but of the 19 classrooms at Bishop, 17 have 23 students or more, and 8 have 25 students or more. And we think this is a really unfair position to put our students at Bishop. We do have amazing teachers, as other schools do, but it would be beneficial to our students who are coming home bored and disinterested because they're not getting the attention of our teachers for us to have more space and smaller class sizes. So what I've done is on the first page, it gives you the median class sizes. And I just want to highlight that the second grade in particular is a very large class overall and has some of the largest classes. But then if you flip to page 3, you see 2015-16. The red squares are ones that are class sizes over 24 or greater. The ones that have highlighted but not fully colored, 2 or 3 more students and they'd be at 24. But now flip through 15-16, 16-17. So here's 17-18. Fairly even over every school. Well, this is 2018. Tell me, which school has overcrowded classrooms in just about every level? And this is really frustrating to us because a year ago, I came here with my then first grader and said, hey, listen, our class sizes are 25. And the response was, oh, we know this is an issue. We know that Bishop has overcrowding classrooms, yet we're still in a position where now we have even more overcrowding than we had last year. So as you're looking at the enrollment numbers, as you're looking at the large classroom TAs that are yet to be assigned, we ask that you look at Bishop. We ask that you don't think about 10 years from now or 5 years from now what you're going to do for Bishop, but what are you going to do today? The McGibbons report showed that we were going to have this big boom with the current second grade class and the current kindergarten class, yet nothing was done to Bishop to help alleviate some of the pressure that's there. It could have started when the current second graders were kindergartners, and those classes could have been made smaller to help alleviate some of this. So please read through what we've written. Sarah's also from Bishop, and she's going to talk a little bit further about the second grade in particular.
Okay, thank you. Sarah Popper.
I don't have many copies of this, so I'm going to pass them around and ask that I can email it to Karen.
Yeah. Okay.
Thanks.
Thank you. That's okay. Okay. I also have a letter here with a number of parents who I've just spoken to this week who are in support of what we're here, who couldn't be here tonight, but wanted to add their name to our cause. I am a former elementary school teacher as well as a Bishop parent of a 4th and a 2nd grader, and I have an incoming kindergartner next year. Karen shared the data regarding the inequity in class sizes as Bishop compares to the rest of the town, but I want to look specifically at grade 2, the current 2nd graders. This cohort at Bishop has maintained the largest class sizes year after year since they entered. In kindergarten, they had classes of 24. In first grade, they had classes of 25. And this year, my son has 26 students in his class and 1 teacher. As both a parent and an educator, I know that that's a lot of children to teach. This summer enrollment for this cohort grew with a total of 11 new students for Bishop and its surrounding buffers. all 4 of these schools have large second grade classes. If 4 or more of those new students were placed at Bishop, then there would have been grounds to create a 4th class, which would have kept class sizes down at all the schools. The average class size for grade 2 in Arlington is 22.8 students. And again, my son has 26 children in his class. There's currently 1 large class size aide assigned to Bishop second grade, and this person is divided among 3 classes, which means at best they add an additional 10 hours of support each week per class. If a 4th second grade at Bishop was added with the current numbers, we would have 4 classes of 19, which is still above the state average of 18, according to the DOE website. Although it's not ideal, music could be held in their regular classroom, which is 40 minutes of their week, which would mean the rest of their time they would be in smaller classes. Also, modulars are used at different schools, which I hear are quite nice. If there is not another section of second grade added at Bishop this year, then full-time aides for each classroom should be assigned. My child and his classmates have been consistently getting the short end of the stick with these large class sizes. Longer-term plans of additions and other ideas will benefit, hopefully, my incoming kindergartner next year, but something needs to be done for these kids in second grade now. You can see from Karen's handout on page 2 there, all the red circles that show the consistent inequality that this cohort have received in Arlington Public Schools. So thank you for your time and attention to this topic, and hopefully we can come up with some solutions quickly.
Thank you. Trying to make sure this doesn't go off there. Okay. Okay, thank you. That's the end of public participation. At this point, we move on to Dr. Bodie and the opening day report.
Thank you. And I will address enrollment in a minute, which is on our agenda. Well, first of all, we had a very smooth opening. A number of principals have said to me it's probably one of the smoothest openings we've had in a couple of years. And that's even with the voting that went on that day. It was light, unfortunately, because we would like to see a more robust turnout. But nonetheless, it was. Oh, you were very.
It was bigger than it's been in many years. Yeah.
It was trickling. It was trickling in. The schools were managing it quite well in terms of the. So that's good to know. But in terms of how it affected the schools, it went very well. And I think that the 11:15 dismissal without lunch made a big difference as well, because otherwise on the very first day of school, in some of our schools, they would have had to have lunch in their classroom. So it worked out well. Now, we don't start a school year smoothly without a lot of preparation that goes on during the summer. And I do need to acknowledge the work of many people that made this possible. The one thing that's always nice when you come into a school is to see it very clean, to see the floors shining, and they look terrific. There was a lot of work that was done this summer by our custodians to maintain the buildings and to bring them up to a really nice level as best as possible. And also on maintenance. We did a lot of painting throughout the district this summer, a lot of repairs, and there was, was considerable effort to open the schools. But also, it's all of our administrative staff, the school secretaries, as well as the people up on this floor, that did a lot. And our IT department was amazing. Every year I'm always impressed with what they accomplish. This year, they had something like 1,700 devices that they were having to repair, unbox, put into classrooms. A good portion of that number was with the Gibbs school. So we opened a new school with all the wiring and infrastructure that's necessary there. But that's a lot. There were 1,300 computers and 400 peripherals. So, as I said, about half of that actually came out of the Gibbs budget. And today, in fact, when I was over at Gibbs, I was very pleased to see in how many classrooms the kids were using computers throughout the school. And in addition to that, there was considerable amount of curriculum work that went on this summer with teachers and professional development. You will get a professional development report later this evening, but it was a significant number of our teachers did work here in the schools or participated in one of our responsive classroom trainings. We ran 3 this summer. So there's a lot that goes on in order to open smoothly, and it did open smoothly. Now, the weather didn't cooperate with us completely on opening week. We had, as you know, only too well, a couple of days of 90 degrees. And in fact, here at the high school, Sam will tell us, that there was, really on Thursday, it just became, that morning, it was very clear that some of the classrooms were just too hot. Not all classrooms, but enough of the classrooms that we weren't going to be able to move students around to keep them in cool places. So we had to, on Thursday, dismiss students. Teachers stayed and worked together that afternoon. But the students were able to leave. In the high school is sort of unique in that it really has very few air-conditioned spaces. For a school this size, we have this room, and we have 3 computer labs, and some little tiny places. So there's no place like a media center that you can rotate students through during the day, or a cafeteria, or for that matter, even Thompson has their gym. So there's no place to have students move and get cool. I will say that I was so impressed with our teachers and our students that during that week, because our teachers all said, we're doing fine. We're doing very well, and our students are doing, learning is taking place. Ideally, this isn't great. I think that it's something that we need to take seriously as we look to the future. Right now, we have only 2 schools which have air conditioning, Gibbs and Pierce. And in fact, on the teachers' opening day the week before, we had to scratch our usual opening day and divide teachers secondary elementary into 2 different buildings, just because it was going to be too hot. So there's something that Director of Facilities and John Denizio and I have talked about is we probably need to bring this to Capitol and have some kind of plan going forward. This isn't becoming exceptional, but becoming more routine as we're both the beginning of the school year and the end of the school year. What this means in terms of how we will proceed is yet to be determined. 2 years ago, I had asked Capitol to, begin funding screens, and we have a 5-year plan for that. And we've had some classrooms been outfitted with screens, and we started with originally we were going to start with all the top floors, but the plan was changed to at least do with the school because it's too hard to sort of just do the top floors of every school. And in those schools, we were able to open windows at night to get it cooler, but we're not anywhere near close enough to getting all the screens installed. So it's something we need to think about. Fortunately, it's much cooler. The schools are in good shape, and hopefully it will remain reasonable for the next month or so. Now, I was going to ask Dr. McNeil if he would talk a little bit about the opening of Gibbs this year, because I was doing my rotation. We were dividing, in a different rotation, and he had the pleasure of being at Gibbs when it opened.
I have video of the first student walking through the door.
Oh,
I have pictures as well, and it just went very smoothly. It was a very festive environment, as you can imagine, it being the first day of a new school. And the kids walked in, they knew what the routine was going to be. They walked straight up into the gym, and Kristen, the principal, had everybody in there, and they just, went through the expectations and talked about, some of the logistics of how the day was going to proceed. And they introduced the teachers, and they did this they had music playing, and the teachers put on sunglasses. It was just a very nice environment, and talking with Kristen and receiving some of the feedback that she has received throughout the week, and still receiving a lot of positive feedback. But on that first day, you know, some of the quotes from the students were like, "This is the best opening day I've ever been a part of," and so just a lot of positive feedback. So, you know, it's just evidence of all the hard work that went into planning for Gibbs, and the result was just a very nice, smooth opening in which everybody was a lot of good positive energy. So it was just nice to be there to see that.
That was one of the areas where teachers worked very hard all last year and through the summer as well. I mean, the amount of hours, if we probably totaled it up, all the people involved in planning, it was an immense amount of effort. But it paid off on the first day.
It sure did.
Yeah, it was terrific. I got over there after they had done the gym, and there were kids wandering around, and oh dear, they missed your videos. But it went very well. So now we have 10 schools here in Arlington, and with our enrollment growth, we need 10 schools in Arlington. So at Addison, I don't know if you've had a chance to see the new foyer. It's red and some cream. It's not all red, but it's very bright. There's a lot of painting that's gone on. The 7th and 8th grade have spread out, and I don't know if Mr. Levy would like to make a comment at all about the opening at Addison this year.
Sure.
Levy is the president of our Teachers Association, and he's also a 7th grade social studies history teacher at Addison.
The opening weekend went very smooth. Last night we had open house, and it just didn't feel like open house because it was just so much less parents with one less grade, and you just really feel it where it's less people in the hallway, students getting to class on time at the beginning of the morning. I've never had students come to homeroom so early. It's been great.
Good. Well, that's been the report from a lot of teachers there, as well as our new principal, Brian Maringer. So, all went well, and I'm looking forward to a great year. So, enrollment. I shouldn't advertise how well. What?
Can we bring up, so I just want to bring up,
Oh, sure.
go back to the heat.
Okay, the heat.
Well, first, I apologize, I forgot to introduce Mr. Levy, and also we have Sam Derringer, who's our student representative today, and he's in grade 10, and his favorite activity is drama. So I just want to go back to the heat, because I heard of a lot of concerns of parents, especially after the AHS announcement that they were going to dismiss students. Children in other schools, the parents of those children, didn't hear anything. But they were very aware that high school was considered too hot and being dismissed. And I felt like even if the other schools were fine, it would have been helpful had a notice come from either you or come from the principals saying, yes, it's hot, but it's okay. This is how we're handling it. You know, our temperatures are different, and something. I just felt like people were getting all upset until their kids came home, and that it was kind of needless. And
Well, that's a fair comment. The principals felt that they were fine. First of all, the other issue is that we don't dismiss elementary students. Right. In the middle of the day. I mean, that would just cause, unless there was a dire emergency, but even when we've had to evacuate a building, we set up contingencies for that because parents are working. And so that's just, and the same thing pretty much middle school. I think I can think of one time where we did that on an emergency, and that was when we had a gas problem in the school. Yeah, remember that. But, the principals felt that the schools, that they were doing fine. They were able to get kids cool and move students around the building, but I think you would make a fair point.
yeah, I'm not questioning the decision. I'm saying the communication, I feel there should have been communication. It would have alleviated a lot of parents' concern, And even, if you had just said, this is how we handle it, this is why we're not doing anything, but it's also fine in here, this is, et cetera, that a timely thing would have made people feel better. Ms. Morgan?
And keeping in mind that it was the first day of school for 300 of our 600 kindergartners. It was literally their first day, because they didn't go on Tuesday, and then half of them went Wednesday, and half of them went Thursday. So this is, they're coming to pick up. They've heard nothing from their principal. Their, high school kids are wandering about town. So it just, again, decisions seemed totally reasonable. Communication was poor coming from, especially from the elementary schools, or maybe just mine.
They may not have even known.
So,
So,
Fair point, and we'll, that happens again, hopefully it won't. We'll make sure that parents know that it's fine. But we were around in schools all week, and in fact, in some schools more than once, and the kids did fine. They were doing very well. There's a lot of effort to also dim lights and keep the energy down as much as possible. So we continue to see enrollment growth. Since I wrote the article for the Advocate and communicated with all of you about enrollment growth, we have had some changes. They've been down. So we have students that register and then don't show up. And we had probably about 24 of those students. But we also have students who were here last year, they move, and they never notify us. And, I will actually put this out in writing to parents this year, because what happens when they don't do that is we do class lists in the summertime, and we actually wait for a number of reasons. This is one of them, to put class lists out to parents. And it's not so much we put class lists out. We send a letter home saying who their teacher is going to be, and then people figure out very quickly what the class lists are. But we base that on who is returning, and if they're not returning, then you can start seeing some early discrepancies in class sizes, and you can see it in the chart that there are some. Because once we've given a child a teacher, it's very hard to say, well, we've decided now to move you to this other room. So it's important. Now, but having said that, we still have an increase over last year, district-wide, of about 250 students. That's a lot of new students. And as you know, as we went through that process with kindergarten, those numbers kept going up. We ended up having to add classrooms in a couple of schools, one of which was Bishop, Stratton, and Dallin. We had talked about Brackett earlier, and we had talked about Pierce before the school year ended. But then all the other schools started seeing an increase in enrollment. But the numbers and class sizes, there's a shifting that has gone on, and it can, honestly, it will continue to go on for another week or so. But most of the shifting has stopped. So that's roughly what our change is. I know that Morgan wanted to know what the difference was in terms of Gibbs going from 5th to 6th grade. And, not surprisingly, so we looked at the number that were in the prior year 5th grade, and then how many went to 6th grade. And there was a drop in 16-17 of 38 students. Last year there was a drop of 29, and this year only 12.
just adding to that, I think historically, when you look at it, the attrition is about 6% has been going into sixth grade. Is like if you go back like 8 years, because it does like jump quite a lot, but it like averages at 6%, and this year looks to be less than 2%. Mm-hmm. Now, you know, that would be the lowest in the last 8 years, but I mean, it does jump a lot. So it'll be interesting to see if it like settles in closer to 2 to 3 as opposed to jumping around 6, or if this year is just anomalously low, or if we lose them going into 7th grade at the Audison. But it does seem, I mean, like under 2% loss is pretty low, mm-hmm. which I think is exciting.
Yeah, and it's it's going well at Gibbs. And there's obviously punch list things to do, which we'll talk about in a minute. But in terms of enrollment, it is true that Bishop's numbers have stayed high. And I think that one of the questions that the committee asked, actually, Ms. Seuss asked, Dr. Seuss asked a couple of years ago, or last year even too, should we look at our redistricting? And with Bishop being in where it exists, it is something I think we need to take a look at as whether we're going to do some more, expand the buffer zones to Stratton and to Thompson. We can't do it really to Brackett. But this is something we should take up in community relations this year, because I think this is now the time when we're starting to see a pattern that we need to perhaps address. But in terms of the short-term situation, I have talked to Principal McEnany, and I do know in the second grade class, there's always 2 adults in the room. It's a combination of the building sub or our large class size TA, the special education liaison, the teaching assistant with the special education liaison. So there's always, and there's also the building sub as well. So there's always support in there. Now, if we feel there's not enough support, then we will look to hire some more teaching assistants. And having said that, it is not that easy. We have a number of positions that are still unfilled throughout the district.
Yeah, I'll mention that.
Yeah, but we have been looking for some teaching assistants throughout the district, and that's not something that is an easily filled position. So cognizant of that, we are, looking at, creative ways that we can schedule and make sure that people are supported in their classrooms. But it is true that grade by grade in Bishop this year, just the increases that happened, that, students were, those numbers, just enough grew in each one of the classes to make them larger. I will say that when we had buffer zone decisions, we tried as much as possible. In fact, when the numbers started growing, we were moving a lot of our buffer zone students to out of the district, but even with that, we had to add a 4th kindergarten. So I think it's the location of Bishop relative to the town that, it has been growing. So the short-term solution is we'll look at extra support in the classrooms. The longer term is that we have to take a look at the district. One of the constraints that we have at Bishop is that this kindergarten took the last available classroom unless we don't have a music or an art classroom. So there are no more classrooms, and to add extra ones. So it would be an unequitable situation if they did not have their own art room. So I think this is something we're dealing with there, and we also have a similar issue in classrooms over at Bracken as well. So that's for another day, another discussion.
Mr. Hayner?
I appreciate you seeing the need for looking at a long-term thing. The demographic study that we had before was great for the time. It's just not bearing any fruit. We're way beyond that right now. We had to add to Thompson. We've added to Hardy. Bishop, you just said it, there's no more room. I mean, unless we do portables or to add classrooms that way. But that's just a stopgap. Some of us believed that this town was going to continue to grow. A lot of people were hoping, and even those that felt it was going to grow, hoped it didn't. We are growing. And the current numbers just show it. We need a long-term plan for Bishop and the other schools that we've just added that 4th classroom, because if we were adding a classroom at the 5th grade, we could hope it was a bubble that year. The reality is this is kindergarten, and because we're doing a great job, we're drawing more and more and more people. And that 4th grade, I'm not a prophet, but I don't think it's a bubble. I think that bubble is just going to bulge right through, and as you said, there's no more room unless we take the art and music, and that's just a short term, even if we did do that. So, I'm not a proponent of adding portable classrooms as a permanent solution. It may be a temporary, we need to look at all our options. And I think Buffer zones, you can just expand them just so far. You've moved them back and forth, they've expanded, and they're bumping into each other. So I think your suggestion of a long-term plan, we need to look at it as soon as we can. We need to tell this town, and the reality is, we're exploding. We're not growing, we're exploding. Thank you.
Ms. Morgan?
So what would be helpful for me and maybe others, I don't know, in thinking about this is understanding, what's the contingency plan, right? What happens next? Because hope's not a strategy, right? We're hoping like 5 years prior births for next year, like looks like it may, go in our favor. A lot of kids born in this kindergarten cohort allegedly going down, but like, I don't like to work with hope. So I want to understand we have 3 schools that we talk about as being full, right? Bishop is full. Dallin was full last year, right? That's what we were told. Dallin was full, which is why there were only 3 kindergarten classrooms last year. We seem to have found a place for a K-1, which is great. So now are they like full? Are they full plus? Like, I don't really know. Like, we can call it whatever we want. But like, so my understanding is Bishop is full. Dallin is full plus. Brackett is full plus, right? So I would like to see us being really transparent about what does happen. What happens if some family with triplets moves in? Well, I mean, it happens, right? What happens if some family with triplets moves in, to the Bishop second grade or the Brackett kindergarten or any one of these places? Like, what happens? What goes next? Because I think we are afraid to talk about that sometimes because you don't want to upset the art teacher, you don't want to upset the music teacher, you don't want to upset the after school or the whatever. But at some point, I just think we need to be really clear about what we do. Like, what's the plan? Because I think there probably is one, we're just not communicating it. And it would make me feel better if I knew, okay, this is, like, there is a plan, this is what we would have to do, it's gonna hurt, but, that's.
No, I don't.
I'm not asking for that response now, but giving us some kind of sense of that at some point in the next, 6 weeks or something would be helpful for me personally.
I heard, okay, Ms. Seuss?
So a couple of things. One, I definitely think we need to look at redistricting options. I also think we need to look, and not that this would solve Bishop necessarily, but at the idea that if someone moves in with a 4th or 5th grader, that they may not necessarily get their neighborhood school. I mean, that's might solve some problems, because the problem with the buffer zones is it's only something we can do at the kindergarten level. And then after that, we have no control. I'm sorry, we can do it with anybody who moves in, right. But you have to be in the buffer zone, right? You have to be we can do a lot more at the kindergarten level, I'm saying. So I think those are 2 things to look at. I know that Bishop is a place where if we could ever build on to something, that would be a possibility. I don't think we're necessarily there yet, but I think we need to start just talking about that. I mean, we're not planning, that's not necessarily what we plan for now, but we should start talking about it. But then the 4th thing I want to say is that I have to say that despite, a lot of very busy, heavy classrooms, this is actually not a bad distribution. There's only 2 classes above 25. And that is actually not bad considering where we've been in the past. And so I just want to give your team credit for doing a good job over those years to make it not quite as awful.
Okay. Mr. Carden?
Thanks. Yes, so 2 comments. One, I would echo my colleague's comment about there being a plan for future contingencies. Maybe it's something that you work with the facilities subcommittee, or maybe you just do it yourself and bring it to the whole committee. But, if it's take the music room in every school, take the art room next, whatever the plan is, we need to put that out there in the public, and see that. Because, I hate to see a situation like at Brackett where we are deciding to have large kindergarten classes because there's no space in the building, largely because there's no space in the building. So, and that happened at Dallin a couple years ago, and it's happened at Thompson before we expanded it. I hate to have class sizes just because we don't have space. So, or just because we're deciding between taking a music room or an art room or doing the extra classroom. So we do need a plan to address that. For the short term, I said it last year, I'm glad that we don't have any classes over 26 yet. That is a good accomplishment. But these large class sizes, the 25 in the kindergarten, the second and third grade classes of that size, or anything over 24, I think is not ideal. I would like to see more support. You mentioned, well, there's always two grown-ups in the room, but those special ed teachers and teaching assistants are there for another reason. They're not there, to support the larger class. So I wouldn't count those. I think we need to see more support in those areas, and I'd like to see more TAs there. And I hope you'll work with the principals and see if that can be addressed.
I'll wait to comment. I have a comment.
Mr. Schlickman.
This is a tough puzzle to solve. And it's absolutely right that as far as the enrollment calendar, or the enrollment chart is, we're pretty well distributed for the most part. But that's no consolation for the folks who are in the largest classes. I think that what we need to do is be a little strategic in terms of looking at those buffer zones and expanding them. Because we're not consistent across grade levels in schools, and if we can somehow take a look at the buffer zones and have a little more play when we're assigning kids within the initial cohort or new kids coming in, that's going to help us tremendously, because a new family coming in isn't necessarily loyal to a building until they set down roots and send their child there for a while. But it's a difficult problem, and I don't envy the Community Relations Subcommittee for volunteering to take your task on. Thank you, Jennifer.
Mr. Spielman.
So my question is, will the expansion of the Hardy, do you think the expansion of the Hardy, will that put us in a position to think about redistricting?
I'm looking at the Hardy as a way to rethink of how we utilize what programs are and how we utilize different things. So I have many plans in my head, B, C, in terms of what we could do. But I think that our first, it's going to be a combination of things. It's not going to just be looking at the district lines. It's going to be taking a look at where we think there's going to be changes, how we can move programs if necessary, where the classrooms are, how we can utilize them to our best advantage. And it's possible that it may be that we use music rooms. We were actually quite willing to do that at Brackett this year, but we had a consultation with everybody involved, teachers, principal, and this was the decision that was unanimously reached. So it's not done just by one person. It's a very cumulative decision as to what happens. But I don't think it's many pieces coming together, and that addition at Hardy might help it's going to be utilized, but, and of course we don't know what's going to happen with Mugar yet down the road, but in the short term, we could use that in some different ways as well, as well as classrooms.
I just, before we have a conversation about embarking on the redistricting process we went through, whenever we went through that, or the buffer zone process, I don't remember what year it was. It was a very long, involved, complicated process with lots of participants, and it took up a lot of time. And if we have to go through it again, we should go through it again. I'm not saying we shouldn't go through it again, but we should just be conscious of a lot of other things we have going on this school year, and we should be. In some districts, in some places, the superintendent's office actually comes with a proposal of this is how we should redistrict. The subcommittees then we hold hearings on it and listen to people, and then the school committee votes. So there's maybe different ways to do it. That's all I want to point out. There may be different ways to do it that could make the process a little more efficient this time around, and just something to think about.
I don't think we're making a motion tonight to begin
Nope.
that process, but I just think since it's been discussed, I wanted to give some context.
Mr. Hayner?
I appreciate the superintendent recognizing the major factor we have no control over, the MUGAR. That could destroy all the extra space overnight. The part, and this is my annual statement, the committee may be tired of me saying it, but I'm going to say it once more. A number 22, 23, 21, 26 is not necessarily the same number. How much time each individual child takes. If they were all identical, these would be legitimate numbers for us to use. But I've said it before. I had a class once of 14 students with 2 full-time aides. They weren't special ed. Nobody wanted that class because they were, when you prorated them, they were equal to 30 kids like that. So we have to be very careful when we say these are great numbers, they're livable numbers. And what I'm suggesting is looking at these children, only the superintendent can do this and the assistant superintendent, because this is privacy issues. I appreciate that. But I need them to be cognizant of this when we look at numbers and when we turn around and say, 24 is a great class size or it's a livable class size. They may be, they may not be. That's my annual pitch for this.
Okay. Ms. Morgan?
So my first request is at some point, are we ever going to get a chart that includes SLC students or never, ever, ever? I'd have one more question after that. Sorry. But do you want to answer that one first?
We have those charts. The reason it's not put this way, and we could do that. We definitely could. What's important to understand is who's the teacher of record, and that's one of the issues. Is they want to teach the students that are in SLC program. The classroom teacher that they are included in is not the teacher of record. And so it's trying to sort of parse that out a little bit. There's no reason why you can't see the number of students. The only issue is, and this is something that we've talked about, is the issue of privacy with respect to identifying students, but how many in a particular grade. And in some cases, there's quite a few, so there's a little bit more hidden, but I'm just conscious of that issue.
I don't know that I would want it to be like called out that there are 2 SLC students in this class. I know, for example, in the Stratton kindergarten or in the Stratton first grade, there's no class of 21. They're a class of 20. I could probably, I know enough about this. I could tell you, I can tell you where all the SLC students are because you can tell because they're where the class sizes are strange, right?
Yes.
And so it would but it makes it difficult to have conversations about this with the community because it's unclear. Like the Stratton first grade is 25, 25, 26. Right? Those are big classes, but it doesn't look like it on this chart because they look like they're 21, 24, 26 because of the distribution of the SLC students. So if we could at some point consider just putting them into the classes that they have a desk in these classrooms, they're there, in varying amounts of time, but I think it would make more sense because those students do drive the class sizes, because they're still a student, right? So that's sort of my request, because I find it difficult to have conversations with people about class sizes when we deal with Brackett, Dallin, and Stratton, because the chart doesn't represent reality. So, and then the other thing is just to echo what Mr. Carden said, these, having aides that are split or trifurcated between a grade, these are people who we are lucky, to your point, and we're going to hear later, we're lucky to get them to come and work for what what we're able to pay them, right? So these are not necessarily, our $20,000 a year employees are not necessarily the ones I want servicing 76 kids with 2 hours here, 2 hours there, 3 hours there. So I hope that we can get some more, long-term aid support in those classes, especially the ones that are at, 26, 20, I'm, really uncomfortable with 25, especially in sort of K1, 2 is So, I mean, I know we have them in the kindergarten, so I feel kind of okay about that, but sort of first and second grade, where we're at 25, 26, having somebody there for a few hours who's also servicing, 50 other kids in different classes seems like a big lift for somebody who we're trying to attract to come in. So that's all I have.
I will say that we attract some very qualified people. We have some wonderful teaching assistants, and yes, we appreciate that they're willing to come here for the salary that we're able to offer. But we do have some wonderful teaching assistants, and in fact, many of them are certified.
No doubt. Just, they're not necessarily the cohort. My preference is to not ask that cohort to split themselves into such small slivers across so many kids.
Okay, so I get to talk just a couple minutes. So one, I wanted to add my support to getting additional help for the second grade at Bishop. I think these numbers are too high for second grade. Two, I agree with Ms. Morgan that we really need to come up with some way of representing how many students are in the classrooms in the schools that have the special programs, because, I mean, whether there's two charts, there's this one, which is the official one for the state, and then there's, or whatever this is, and then there's the other, that this is how many desks are in the classroom. However you want to do it. I just think there's got to be some way that we can talk about it, because otherwise, trying to explain to people the difference between a Valentine list and the class list, or the class size. And, the Valentine list is how many Valentines you have to hand out for your class. But your class size is not that, because maybe there are kids who aren't there the whole time and stuff. And then the final thing that hasn't been brought up, but I think should, is that we need to revisit doing a demographic study. We've been talking about that. I think it's time to get this moving. I think there's been discussion about who and how. We can have a subcommittee if you want, take that discussion up to determine who's the best person if you want help with it. But I think we need to get moving on this again. And whether it's an update from the person we used before, or whether it's a new person, I'm not picky about.
We've had an update from the person we used before. It's part of the original contract that they do an evaluation every year. And he did take a look at that, and
Could we get that?
And we can do a more deep analysis from him, yes. I've already talked to him about that possibility. Now, having said this, some people would like to perhaps to triangulate this perhaps with yet another demographic report, perhaps. And there are other places out there that do these kinds of analyses, and that's something we can look at. We can look at the Donahue Institute, or we can look at NESDEC. The NESDEC hasn't traditionally been as accurate, no. But there are places that we could get other reports, and that's something that we could look into.
Okay, thank you. Anything more, Mr.
Just
Hayner?
want to just add on that, I think it would be beneficial to have an accurate, as solid thing as we can have for the upcoming override. I think a lot of people,
That's a
there
good
are
point.
people out there
That's a
that
good
don't
point.
believe that we're growing, or don't believe they don't believe
Haven't
we're
been
growing at the
outside.
rate we're growing, to the point that we need all this stuff. And, I mean, we see it day to day. You walk into the buildings, you know it's happening for reality. But having this is just one more piece in our arsenal
Yeah,
going
just,
forward.
just for viewers, or many viewers at home, or millions and millions, what is our current total?
Well, our current total, actually,
above
this number is
6,000?
it's actually a little bit less than the number that came out on September 6th. In fact,
But this
Okay.
doesn't include all the out-of-district.
it does not include our district, does not include preschool. Our preschool, I think, is at 95.
Okay.
So we are over 6,000 students in our district.
So that's big.
That's big. That's big, but it's also just the number that we're growing in our buildings as well.
Yeah.
A week ago, we were at 5,890 students in our buildings, not preschool, not out of district.
Yeah. Okay.
Paul and I were just saying, we remember the low 4,000s.
4,300 kids in the district.
You don't look that old.
Well, he does.
Actually, I remember it too.
Hey, you were here.
Yeah.
No.
No.
But as I said to the teachers, they're doing a great job. They are. We have great teachers. And I think that's one last comment I would make before we move on the agenda, and that is, and I've said it before, and it's really true, it's the quality of the teaching that goes on in the classroom that's the most important factor, not whether you have 21 or 25 students. And yes, research shows that in your really low grades, in kindergarten, first grade, it does make a difference, but the studies only show it makes a difference when there's less than 18. And we're not seeing that, and we're not going to see that in the near future. So I think we're very fortunate. We have great teachers, and we have some new teachers this year, which were vetted quite a lot, and so we're very hopeful, and we'll be there to support them to do a great job. So we'll talk about that when Rob gives his report.
Okay, so next, we need to appoint Dr. Bodie as a voting member of the EDCO board. Each year, we have to annually execute the agreement and appoint the superintendent or one school committee member as a voting member of the collaborative board.
So moved.
Second?
So no one else wants to do it, we just want her,
Not at all.
That's fine, just checking, okay. So, I've heard a second, I've heard motion, a second, any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, any abstentions? Okay, so that was unanimous, and we have appointed her.
EDCO has a new director, Nadine Ekstrom. She is, just started this summer. Her background is that she was a superintendent. She's also been a director of special education. She was a curriculum coordinator in Brookline. So she comes to EDCO with a wide range of experience, not to mention the fact that even before she went into education, she had her own business. So very fortunate that she is with us, and this is her first year. And if you would like, she's willing to come at some point during the year and just talk about EDCO.
Yeah, I think that'd be good.
Okay.
We can sit down and figure out when it would be
All
best. Okay, so next, Mr. Spiegel is going to talk about the APS staff hiring update.
Okay, so this is just going to be a brief overview of our staffing changes over the summer. This will cover in October the demographic data and ethnic and racial data from all our staff. But it's been a very busy summer, as always. We have several new administrators in the district, a new Hardy principal, a new Ottoson principal, and a new Ottoson assistant principal. We have a new elementary special ed coordinator who is actually starting in not a week and a half, a new athletic director, and we've increased the FTE of the dean at Arlington High School. So we now have 3 full-time deans at the high school. New teachers, we've hired 65 new people in the new employees to the AEA Unit A bargaining unit. That includes teachers, specialists, team chairs. The majority, 44, replaced teachers who either retired, resigned, moved to another position, or are on a full-year leave. 21 are new positions. That's and some are partial FTEs. And we have, as always, we continue to hire from within. We have hired 16 people who have been teaching assistants or building subs or substitutes or done student teaching in Arlington, or had been long-term subs. There's a breakdown by school. The high school is big. There's a lot of new teachers in the high school. There's a lot of reasons for that. I know you can see the English department has quite a few new teachers. We've had it was a year where we had a retirement. We have someone on a leave of absence for a year. We have someone who moved to the middle school from the high school. So there's some other changes that sort of necessitated some new teachers here, and there were some FTE adds, of course, in the English department.
And then pretty much every school has something, has someone new. And Gibbs had a few new teachers added, new to the district. And so you have that breakdown. So other than teachers, we've hired so far, and this is counting, we're still continuing to hire teaching assistants, building subs, tutors, and 47 as of today. It may have gone up a couple since I prepared this. We most are replacing people who resigned a lot or moved up to a teaching position. We do have, in this field, it's common that teaching assistants want to move within education to become teachers or other professional positions, and so it's a position that we need to refill every year. And then again, we added the full-time kindergarten teaching assistants this year. So some of them are new, some of them were half-time teaching assistants who've become full-time. At least 12 have master's degrees, many are in master's programs. We do tend to attract a very well-educated teaching assistant force for various reasons. It's sometimes people who are looking to get jobs as teachers in education and view this as a stepping stone, which it is, either here or in other districts. And others maybe are people who have taken a break from the workforce for a while and are starting to get back into it and maybe have kids at home, and this is a way to get back into the workforce. Other new employees, we've hired people throughout the district: bus drivers, food service, traffic supervisors, cafeteria and recess monitors, substitute teachers, and the after-school employees. I want to focus on a couple things. The traffic supervisors, now that Gibbs is open, there are 3 traffic posts at the Gibbs school, 2 on Broadway and 1 on Mass Ave. So there will be, so that has, and we haven't eliminated any other traffic supervisors from any of the other schools. So there are 3 additional traffic supervisors this year. The after-school programs have expanded a lot. As was brought up in last year, a lot of the parents were asking for more after-school spots. Our in-house Arlington after-school program, which is at Audison, Gibbs, Hardy, and Thompson, we've increased our staffing at those locations to add more slots. We're still looking to complete some of the hiring at the after-school programs. That's a challenge. It's sometimes challenging to fill all of the positions we have. I do want people to know that the people who work in the after-school programs work 25 to 26 hours per week. That makes them eligible for benefits. That makes them members of the Arlington retirement system. So it's a significant investment that we have to hire our after-school teachers, and it's worth it to have good after-school programming, and we have a very solid staff, good leadership in our after-school programs, but it is a significant investment that the town is making in after-school programming. Again, the process is people are interviewed at the schools, the principals or the curriculum directors are doing the hiring, and then they come to HR, do all the paperwork. We go over all the benefits, all the policies, and required trainings. We make sure everyone has their CORIs and fingerprints. We have had a very busy summer up here on the 6th floor. The payroll department, the HR department, the superintendent's office, everyone up here has been working hard, getting letters out, making sure that people are getting paid. And our IT department, I know it was mentioned earlier of how many new devices we had. Getting devices in the hands of all of the new teachers can be challenging and was not perfect this summer, but we have been able to do that. And it's a lot of work for our IT department to get all the new teachers the devices they need and the training they need for the systems that we use in Arlington. And then, again, our Marie Janiak, who is our new teacher training and mentor coordinator, has spent a lot of time this summer preparing the new teacher training and orientation, which happened at the end of August, to get all the new teachers the training that they need and connected with their mentors. And that process will continue all year with the mentoring going on. That's it.
Mr. Hayner.
The full-time subs that we have, are they part of the AEA?
So the full-time subs, if they're not, no, not yet, until they get to be, if they're here for a full year and they're in a one-year position, but if they're sort of, we've had a couple positions last year, and this year we have a position that we've hired, which it worked out very well last year, and I think it'll work out really well this year, as a full-time permanent sub with benefits, so they're benefit eligible and everything, and they are covering for teachers on leave. And last year we had 2 people in those positions, and it was multiple teachers for the same year. They weren't with the same class.
Don't a lot of our buildings have 5 days a week a permanent substitute teacher?
That's a different thing. The permanent
that was part of the hires.
So the building subs.
The building subs, I'm sorry.
So there's a distinction. The building subs who kind of float throughout the building, they're like teaching assistants. They're like the building teaching assistants.
AEA.
Well, they're part of the paraprofessional bargaining unit.
They're not on the Unit A.
They're not in Unit A.
And they have benefits because they work X amount of hours.
They work enough hours, they're benefit eligible and in town retirement, yes.
Thank you.
Okay, Mr. Thielman.
Vacancies, how many vacancies do we have? Do we have teaching vacancies?
We don't have any teaching vacancies as of now. I mean, I think we're staffed with our teachers. We do have long-term sub vacancies. Okay. We are now getting to a point where all the permanent positions are filled, but we are looking for people going on maternity leaves or other types of leaves that we're going to be filling this year. So we're looking for those positions, but we are looking for teaching assistants pretty much at almost every level, including preschool, elementary, middle, high. We're looking for daycare assistants still in our daycare program. And so if anyone out there is looking or knows people who are looking for those types of jobs, send them my way.
And then the second thing is some districts, both suburban districts and obviously Boston, have had issues with school bus drivers. We have any issues with, we have enough drivers? We haven't had any issues with?
We've hired a driver this summer. We haven't, in terms of our buses, and I think the superintendent might be able to speak more to this, have run really well so far this year. I don't think we've had any problems with the buses, and we don't have as many buses as some of the other districts do, but the Gibbs buses, I think, have run really well so far, and everything else. And yeah, no, we do.
Great.
Our bus drivers are.
Thank you.
Ms. Morgan.
How many teaching assistant openings? Is there a number? Like first digit, maybe? Like, is it 10? Is it 20?
It's less than 10. I mean, less than 10.
That's fine.
Somewhere
Like,
between
just
5 and 10.
looking for order of magnitude.
Yeah, we need a few here and there, and maybe we'll see after tonight if we need more. But
Thank you.
Mr. Carter.
Oh, Ms. Morgan asked my question. Thank you.
I was just wondering if you could tell me a little bit more about the mentoring program. So does every new teacher get assigned a mentor that they are with for the whole year? Yeah. Is it a month? Okay.
Well, and the superintendent and the assistant superintendent may be able to speak more to this, but we also have specialized mentors at the elementary level for literacy and for math, and we have great people who are math and literacy mentors at those levels. And it also, the level of mentoring for new teachers depends on the type of license they have. So in the 65 new teachers that we've hired this year, there's a vast array of experience. We have hired some teachers who have a lot of experience, who have professional teaching licenses because they've worked for other districts for a long time. If you already have a professional teaching license, you don't need as much mentoring for the Department of Education because you've already reached that license level. If you're a new teacher, you need to have a full year of induction program plus mentoring beyond the first year.
Okay.
But all new teachers get some mentoring to the district because they're new to the district. So it just depends on what they need.
Okay, great,
actually.
thanks.
Mr. Card.
I was actually going to make a suggestion. If you send out if you're still looking for applicants for these positions, if you send out something through the town notices, it can get reposted on Facebook and people will see it. I know Newton did that recently. Actually, an Arlington parent posted it for Arlington parents to apply. And I was, well, do we need, do I need to apply?
Yeah, no, I know there was something in the Advocate a week or two ago, a little in the news section.
Okay.
I don't know if anyone saw that. And there was a feature in the Advocate a week or two ago with some photos of our new teachers. It was online. So some of the new teachers were profiled in the Advocate.
Thank you very much. Moving on, we have now come to the discussion of the Special Education Program Evaluation Report. Ms. Elmer.
I apologize if I'm sniffling through this. I have like those seasonal allergies and one good eye at the moment because of it, but so I apologize for that. So last year, we completed a program evaluation through the Lab Collaborative, and they came on site in October to begin a record review. They then were doing observations of classrooms in October and November, and interviewing staff in November and December, and they issued a final report at the end of May last year. And so the purpose of this evaluation, there is a requirement under the DESE around regularly evaluating your programs, and so we asked them to focus particularly on our inclusionary practices for special education, because we have been doing ongoing work with DECO Children's Services on our sub-separate programming, and so we really wanted to look at the inclusionary practices. And this will really be a tool to help us as we engage in the long-term planning, specifically for the 5-year strategic planning and whatnot. So this was a very timely report for us. Robert McCardle and James Early, you're probably familiar with at least one of them. I know Dr. Early, who's been a superintendent, as well. They used to work with Walker Partnerships and now are contracting with Lab Collaborative to do program evaluations. So, as I mentioned, during the record review, they reviewed IEPs for very specific, looking at elementary IEPs, out-of-district IEPs, high school transition. So they selected IEPs based on various criteria. They looked at our district curriculum accommodation plan, the program descriptions. They looked at our census data, as well as what we're doing in our tiered interventions for math and literacy and our student support team processes. And so I just highlight that because while we talked about inclusionary practices for special ed, this really was a review of programming in general for the district and looking at both general ed and special education supports that create an inclusive environment. And they did 47 site observations across all grade levels, K to 12, across the different schools, as well as interviewed 51 staff members to comprise this report. And you'll see that they spoke to principals, other administrators, special ed teachers, general ed teachers, our related service providers, as well as teacher assistants. And with that report, they had several commendations for the district. You'll note with comparisons to the state averages, we have a higher number of students who are in full inclusion settings, as well as fewer students who are in substantially separate settings than the state average. Also, the models that we have in place at the high school for co-teaching, and particularly that piece of common planning time for those teachers was a commendation, as well as the model that we have at the middle school for co-teaching. Keeping our class ratios below the 50% for co-teaching. They also commended the Millbrook Assessment Center and the Harbor and Shortstop programs at the high school, which, for those who are unfamiliar with them, are general ed programming for students who are re-entering the high school after extended absences or hospitalization. The use of technology throughout the district, as well as, and mentioning specifically the Google School format for data collection. In reviewing our census data, you'll see that we're below the state average for special ed eligibility, and that's been consistent for several years here in Arlington, at least the past 7. And so identifying that we are not over-identifying students for special education, which isn't the case in all districts across the Commonwealth or even across the country, so that was notable. And the one area where there is inconsistency with the state is eligibility under what would be neurological, which is an eligibility category, and specific learning disability, and they're essentially flopped with what the state averages are. And that's simply what category under which they found eligible. There's 13 disability categories, and ours are being found eligible under neurological at higher rates than the state, and lower rates for specific learning disability.
Much higher, though.
Yes.
5 times almost.
Yes. And I think if do you want to respond to questions, or is that something?
Sorry.
No, I would just say, to me, that's not a particularly surprising finding, because if you look at the eligibility criteria in those categories, they are pretty subjective. I think what a lot of people don't recognize is diagnosis is not necessarily the category under which you might become eligible. So if you look at definitions for communication impairment, neurological impairment, specific learning disabilities, those can be broadly interpreted, and so that inconsistency is something that is notable for us, that we are on the high end for neurological compared to the rest of the state.
Do you want me to wait?
Yeah, let's-
Or
Okay.
respond to that? Okay, I'll come back to it.
Okay. And we'll talk about some of the stuff that we're doing to address that. During their observations, they noted that the needs of students were driving instruction, that staff were demonstrating flexibility, as well as continuous efforts to refine the curriculum for content instruction. They then broadly defined areas of finding. I know we only have 20 minutes, and I know there's questions, so I've tried to condense a large report into a relatively short PowerPoint presentation. I apologize, I'm going on 2 different screens. The areas of finding were in what they label as the pre-referral process. Again, this would be prior to special ed eligibility, or multi-tier systems of support, what a lot of people would call RTI. The use of teacher assistants across the district, co-teaching and inclusion services, IEP development and evaluation, and communication and internal processes were the broad areas of findings. And then they had recommendations under each of those categories. Under the pre-referral or multi-tier systems of support, they looked across the district and noted that practices weren't uniform from school to school with their student support team process. Also that we need to continue efforts that we've started around the implementation of that. And some of the work that we're doing with the district-wide data team and whatnot will inform that. The co-teaching model, while noted for its commendations, again, across the district, it is not implemented consistently from school to school or from level to level. So the model at the high school and middle school are noted as areas of commendation. At the elementary school, we do not have it as consistent. Again, not surprising, we have 7 elementary schools. We have, at the time, 1 middle school and 1 high school. So that variability among schools is something that they have recommended we address. And that as we move toward developing more co-teaching models, that we're going to need to maintain balanced enrollment in these classes, which I know class discussion of both class composition and class size is a factor everywhere. And that really, in order for these models to take off, there has to be a commitment from administration to supporting these at the building level. In the areas of professional development, we need to look at a more comprehensive approach for both general ed and special education topics, as well as recognizing that our teacher assistants, which we do have a lot of, the availability for training with them is limited, and we have to find ways to, and likely as they become, part of the union, how we're going to meet the needs for their professional development as well. And continuing to design training around general issues of special education, terminology, practices, procedures, regulation, more of that nuts and bolts type stuff around special ed, so that general educators are as well versed as special educators in that. Recommendations around how to maximize efficiencies and communications within the department, as well as establishing guidelines for determining how and when a special ed, in this case teaching assistant, is deemed necessary for a student or program or classroom, and oversight between both the building and the district level around special ed personnel, and between the building principals and our district level administrators around the supervision and coordination of those services. They also noted the transition practices from levels, so from pre-K to elementary, elementary to middle, middle to high school. While they are in place, they are, again, inconsistent, or they're not the same practices, and that we need to codify some of the practices. There also needs to be a review of what we consider special ed instruction in class support or support programs across the district. So looking at, again, those co-teaching models, and are they true co-teaching models, which are co-planning, co-instructing, co-assessing? Are we seeing special educators taking on more of a TA role than a co-teacher role, and those kind of practices? And looking at more unified data collection systems. Again, at the different levels, they've found different tools that work for them, but at what one elementary school might be using for data collection is different than another elementary school. So as we look to this year specifically, we've already begun with professional development already at the start of the year for teacher assistants as well as those working with TAs. One of the very specific recommendations was that adults working together in classrooms weren't always sure which roles were delineated or how to best support students or each other in that role. So we've been working on that already, and we'll be continuing to use the professional development time throughout the year to work on that. I mentioned that we've been doing work with Wadico Children's Services on program development, so that will continue. To address the communication recommendations, we've developed a communications ladder that's on our website as well as distributed to staff, working to memorialize those transition procedures. We will also have our role-alikes, or our related service providers, working on developing what they defined as entrance and exit guidelines, but we're looking for greater consistency around eligibility findings, so those categories of eligibility, so that there's greater consistency. Recommended services, so that, you know, if one school you are getting OT and the recommendation is 2 times 30, why is another school saying, oh, I would only see that student for consultation, not direct service? So getting greater consistency in those practices, as well as the other piece of how do you know when a student no longer needs a service. So they'll be working on that throughout the year in groups. And then Mr. McNeil and I will be working with curriculum directors to think about the co-teaching recommendations that are in here and how we can work to support those individuals as well as building administrators. And I think you're going to talk about the district goals, but the 5-year plan, I think you're going to see some of the other recommendations referenced in some of the requests that we have for budget and whatnot to address some of these other recommendations.
Thank you. Mr. Hayner.
To go back to that one of the charts that was in the information that was given before with all the statistics and stuff, we are either at or below all the categories compared to the state, with the exception of the neurological, as you stated. I'm not trying to diminish it, and I realize that these are broad categories, but it is substantially bigger. Without getting into the specifics, are they across the grade levels, this 25%? Students, in other words, I mean, I guess where I'm coming from, with such a large number, the first indication would be, have we hired a professional to deal with this large population? But if the population is across all over the district, I don't know.
So I think, without going into too much detail, you
Right.
would really want to look at what the neurological category is under the eligibility criteria, because as I mentioned, it's pretty broad, and so that's why we have, when I say the word neurological, you're probably thinking somebody who has a brain-based epilepsy
No,
or something. And what
I
it is
understand that.
much broader,
Right, I
so
understand that
that's
part.
why I don't know that we have a professional, I
Okay,
guess, to answer your question.
I guess what I'm saying is because of the stark out of proportion from the state,
Yeah.
this is something, we need resources in to mitigate our costs and all the other, the aspects of that, and I'm sure you're on top of it. I didn't want this to be, I don't want this to come out negative towards you personally. We're well within the norm except this one section. I have no idea why Arlington is unique in this and like that, but we have to be aware of it, that's all. And
Oh, definitely, and I think those working groups that I've talked about, the role-alikes, that's, the school psychologists are going to be working together this
Okay.
year, and it's going to be focusing on
They were aware
getting
of it this time.
grading, they were aware of this before this finding.
The other aspect, as far as training, I have a deep concern of TAs being the active servicer of an IEP. I have no problem under the direction of a special ed teacher or the co-teacher, I want certified, qualified people. Not that the TA may not be qualified, but the term TA to me should be support as opposed to direct servicing. That's my concern.
Right, TAs can deliver instruction, they cannot design it, and they should not be designing it.
But they should also be under the supervision of somebody.
Oh, definitely.
At
Yes.
that time. That's my concern is having 4 or 5 IEPs in a room and one certified professional, either SPED or general ed, and 2 or 3 TAs delivering, making it very difficult. I just want us to be covered in all aspects. Thank you.
Oh, I just have a question. Can we have not a question, but can we have the slides given to us? Because we have the
Yeah, it's
44-page document.
Oh, the document's in Novus,
We have a 45-page document, but I don't
Yes.
think we have the slides.
and I uploaded it tonight, I believe, didn't I?
It's not
No,
there.
it wasn't there
Not
yet.
Maybe it
Okay.
didn't make
Yeah,
it there.
Maybe, yeah.
Okay, great. Yeah, so we'll get it.
Should've- yeah.
Mr. Carter.
Thank you. So a couple things. I assume you'll present this to the CPAC and with notice so that it's specifically going to be presented, so people that are interested can go to that. On the WIDECO recommendations, Dr. Woody had mentioned those too. It would be great if you could summarize those and come back to us at some point regarding the recommendations that they've given you regarding the programs and things like that.
So, WIDECO, sorry. So the
WIDECO, sorry.
WIDECO program, they haven't done an evaluation. So they presented, was it last year or the year before? I believe Dallin and, was it Stratton or someone from the high school? So they've been working with our programs for a while, and you had the team from Dallin present what they, and Magali from the high school, what they've been doing as a group. There is a very different process, which, and supported by the recommendations that the individuals who are doing the work are helping to define what the best practices are, what the evidence base is, and then designing what we would say the inputs and outputs of a logic model. So there's not an evaluative piece of WIDECO coming in and saying that, but we can certainly do an update from the
that'd be great.
teams who've been working with them.
Great. And then, I guess, just to comment, there are a great number of recommendations here, a lot of work to be done, basically, a lot of professional development to be developed, a lot of policies, procedures, handbooks, exit and entrance criteria. They threw in a bunch of recommendations they didn't go over in the appendix about other stuff that they recommend that we do. So certainly it's more than you and your current team can do. So I hope that as we develop the budget, you will consider some support in developing these important things, because I think that's one of the things that's hurt us as a district historically, is that developing the policies and procedures and the handbooks and getting these teams together and facilitating all of this work requires somebody to do that who's not busy with day-to-day work. And so it's been a shortcoming for a very long time. This report, I think, outlines it in stark fashion about a very long list of things we need to do and really nobody to really do it. I mean, you are starting on a few of the items, but clearly you're only making a small dent, so hopefully.
Sure, and I do think with some of the recommendations, and yes, for the people who have viewed the report, they're much more specific in breaking that down. Some of the things are in place, so what we've talked about is a little bit more about the communication piece. So some of the stuff around processes and they're very specific, like people don't know how to get a translation. Well, there's very clear procedures and guidelines, but do people know that they need to go to the Google site to go access that? Are there team chairpersons who could tell you in their sleep how to go get a translation? Yes. If they interview a teacher, do you know how to get a translation for a meeting? Do they know that? So there's some pieces that are already there that don't have to be created, but we need to do a better job of communicating and making sure that people are aware of them. And to that end, we have started that work, particularly with the new teachers coming on board. So we mentioned that we have new teacher orientation on the week in August, and we spent a lot of time as a special ed department with those folks doing some of that stuff in the practice of who do you ask when you have a question? Because that was one of the things in the exit interview with the evaluators was, well, people just didn't know. And they said, well, did they know who to ask? And that wasn't always the follow-up question. If you don't know, who would you ask? So in addition to the communication ladder that we have for families, we have one for staff. You have a question about this, this is who you go to. So we're hoping some of that stuff will clear up and direct people to the resources that do exist. But yes, this is clearly not something that's going to be addressed in a year.
Great. Thank you.
No one else? Okay, thank you very much. That was helpful. Next up is the district goals. Dr. Bodie.
Do you have the clicker down there?
Oh, I just gave it to her. What do you need?
I need the piece. Oh, she has the piece?
It's in the computer.
Right, it's in the computer.
To begin this, for people who are first listening to this, I think a little bit of context would be helpful as we look at this, at these particular goals. The school committee, a number of years ago, I think it's been about 5 years ago or 6 years ago, we had a retreat to develop overarching goals. And these overarching goals really set a framework of a vision of what is important in categories of student achievement, professional development, infrastructure, and community relations. And every year we develop objectives to really their strategies in terms of how we are going to improve. It's just a culture of a constant looking at what we need to do and improving upon it, just as this is part of what we're going to be doing with the inclusionary practices in special ed. So last year we developed a number of objectives for this year, but they are fairly broad, and I think that in understanding what those mean in the day-to-day actions that we do, it's important to sort of see what the actions are to support them. So the first objective, and I can't read it that far apart. Yeah, okay, thanks. The first objective for this year under the student achievement goal was students will engage in curricula that are designed in response to the district's vision of students learner, remain in alignment with state standards, and are coherent within each discipline. I want to speak for a second a little bit to that vision of student as learner. We've gone through a process that involved a lot of stakeholders, teachers, parents, outside group Vision 2020, to develop what would be a vision of student as learner and global citizen. That's different than the overarching goals. It's really a portrait of the graduate. When a student graduates from Arlington High School, what are the capabilities, knowledge, and what should they know and be able to do in order to be successful in career in college? And we developed that last year, and I think this is something we want to revisit. We want to revisit it with the school committee this year because we haven't actually gone through sort of an approval process for that. But I will say, as we've been doing work on goals, that vision has become something of a North Star. In that, if you want students to be collaborative and be able to work in teams, then what are we doing from kindergarten through 12th grade in support of that? It's just not something that happens in the last year that you are in our public school system. So it involves the curriculum, it involves the culture of the schools, it involves the learning opportunities we provide to students. So as we move forward with this, there are a number of actions that we're going to take. Do you have the slides that?
That's what I'm asking. Is that the one that's in Novus?
It should be in Novus right now. What you have, you have two things in Novus. You have what I gave you back in the summer. We were looking at some of the actions we're going to take and what the benchmarks are going to be. But what we did this week is sort of we had a meeting, central office, and Sarah Bird, I'll give a lot of credit for having us think about how we can group these so they're a little bit more understandable by different grade levels, so you can see what's happening in different groups.
So the one that we have isn't grouped.
It's just.
They look same
It should be.
It's the chart. It's in a.
No, but the presentation is also there, but they're not the same slides.
It's not the same.
It's not what we're seeing.
That's right.
Okay, we're
Is it-
flexible.
Email it.
It's in Novus. All right.
This one's not.
Okay.
This afternoon
Yes.
at 2 o'clock, when I downloaded mine in Novus, it has subsequently been added to it, which I'm not knocking the superintendent. This is separate. I've got one piece. The second piece is now in Novus, as you just said.
It is in Novus.
It's not that one. Okay, so, once again, we're getting things,
Yeah.
No, we redid this yesterday, and so today I've been trying to
get
get it. But you have the different actions, and we can go through them, but we just thought this would be a different way to group them. There's nothing that is different in this than what you have. It's just grouped differently, that's all. And it's something that, could you pull up the, Daniel?
Well, I don't. Did you share it with?
Yeah, it's in Novus.
It's not.
You don't have?
No, it's not
This
enough.
is what we've gotten of it.
Yeah.
want to wait till the next one? Next meeting?
We could wait till the next meeting and talk about it, but let me just frame this a little bit more. The feedback we had received from you is that in terms of what the benchmarks are, you're trying to show that you have a committee, well, you look at agendas, or you want to show that you did a professional development, you show it. But one of the things we really want to look at a little bit more is what is why are we doing all this? We're doing this so that we support students in their learning and help them grow as human beings. And so what we want to do is take another look at the benchmarks from a different angle, and that is, what is the effect for students? What are the student outcomes that are going to be the result of this? So, for example, one of the actions we're going to do this year is we've begun it already. In fact, we had another training right before school opened, is training staff on mental health first aid. So at this point, I think we have about 200. We're probably going to be looking at, we had 300, but I think we're going to have more than that this year. How many students are affected by having a teacher or an administrator or a teaching assistant who has had this kind of professional development? So it's going to take us a little bit more time to do that. We're not changing the number of actions that we're doing, but what rather we're doing is expanding what you were trying to drive at. And we agree with you. That would be great to see what is the effect, what is our hopeful effect. So what I put into Novus later this afternoon, kept getting interrupted a lot today trying to get this put together, is really just a regrouping. So you can see it by grade level in terms of what the different actions are. And I think that what you will see when you look at it is how it is distributed really across the whole district. And I think it just makes more sense in coherency of this.
Let me just clarify.
Yes.
Okay, is what you're saying, the regrouping is what we're seeing up on the screen?
Yes.
Okay, so that's not in Novus.
Right.
Right? We'll get it, I'm sure we
It
can
must
get
be,
it.
because you have it, no?
No, no one has it.
No.
I uploaded those two documents right before the meeting. I'm not sure why they're not coming up in Novus.
Well, one
Well,
of
we
them.
can-
Mine says presentation, but it's
What
not.
would I like your suggestion, because I think what would be very good over the next couple of weeks is for you to take a look at these.
Okay.
And, this is just sort of like the beginning of this, and to tell you what we're planning to do in terms of looking at student outcomes that are related to these, that are not in addition to, but not substituting for, already what we've identified are benchmarks.
I think this reflects the input that you got from us in the subcommittee meetings. And
Yes.
I'm really excited about it, but I'd like a chance to digest it.
Absolutely.
So that we can have a good response to you on this.
Okay, so let's,
And I'll just say one last thing on it. We're looking at it a little bit more holistically in terms of the multi-year budget. So like, how does this all relate in terms of what we're going to be asking in the budget as we go forward? So it's an evolution of what we're trying to do.
Evolution?
An evolution.
In a public school, be careful.
okay, so we'll get this version in Novus tomorrow maybe, and we can all download it and look at it, and then
Yeah.
we'll talk about it at next meeting. We're done for it now.
We're done for it now. That's
Okay,
good.
great. So next is the summer professional development with Dr. McNeil.
Thank you. So this summer, I just want to kind of give you an overview of the themes. The theme was really looking at Tier 1 instruction, which has to deal with a lot of the district goals that we have stated in the document that Dr. Bodie had up there, and also related to some of the topics that Allison referred to through the special education report. So I'm just going to go through and just give you some highlights from each one of the content areas, because you have the full report in Novus of the different content areas. So if you want to read it further, you can do so on your own. If you have any questions, I'll be able to answer those questions. But looking at ELA, the way that I grouped it is I grouped it by content areas. So in ELA, one of the district goals is for students to take more ownership of their learning. So looking at the 8th grade, that's exactly what they focused on in order to help students find their voices and develop ownership of their learning. And they have various descriptors that are part of that plan. In ELL, the K through 8 staff continued to work on updating and adding to the ESL model curriculum units, which are designed by the state. And in history and social studies, continue that discussion with Colonial Day. I feel like that's a two words that we want to maybe stay away from, but just looking at the reforms that took place, and we told the community that we would revisit the units that have to deal with Colonial Day topics. And so the staff, the 3rd grade teachers, met with outside organizations such as the Royal House to gather information about slavery in the New England and more specifically in the Medford area. They also enriched their learning by participating in activities where they learned more about the free African Americans, women, transgender, and gay and lesbian individuals during the colonial era. They followed up the activity by examining possible new resources and sharing them with their peers and giving recommendations on which resources to develop the curriculum around. Looking at the 8th grade, again in history, social studies, there's been updated standards from the state with more of a focus on civics. And so the teachers began brainstorming about units, essential questions, vocabulary, and possible textbooks or resources that they can use and that would be aligned with the updated standards. And they also laid out a rough timeline for the year of tasks to accomplish moving towards the new curriculum. So that's related to the updates that were made through the state with those standards. Instructional technology, they conducted courses that had to look at tools for digital research, also working with Chromebooks, looking at Google Classroom, Google Forms and quizzes, looking at the Power Teacher, ProGrade book, basic computer skills, and again, looking at student voice and choice. So a lot of those classes were offered by our digital instructional technologists that were in each building. And that would include Jeff Schneider from the high school, Joanna Bradley from the middle school, and Susan Bisson, who was the director of instructional technology. Looking at math, we looked at work around the realignment of courses as it relates to computer science, and also at the high school, curriculum realignment for Algebra 1. Again, that's related to the co-teaching opportunities and looking at, eliminating Curriculum B, and so students would be on that Curriculum A track. And that has to deal with some of the co-teaching opportunities that Allison referred to in her report. Looking at performing arts, and this is, I want to point out that Bill Papacisis, our performing arts director, this is his first summer that he had to work with staff because that was a newly created position that was added to the administrative department. And so what they did is that they looked at the various courses, the outlines for templates for curriculum, and they actually created course outlines for courses at the high school level, more specifically Drama 1, Intro to Music Technology, Madrigal Singers, Choral, Freshman Course Songwriting, and Film Scoring, where there was no curriculum documents for those particular high school courses up until this summer. So, and this is part of a larger long-term project that they're going to continue to work at the high school level to provide those materials. So they will have those course outlines. And making sure that they're aligned to the standards as well from the state. Looking at science, there was work, at Gibbs, 6th, 7th, and 8th grade, looking at new science resources being phased in for middle grades, and then looking at the technology PD to update resources that teachers have access to at grades 6th, 7th, and 8th. And then there was work at the physical science in 9th grade, biology in grade 10, anatomy, again, looking at updating the curriculum so that they're aligned with the Massachusetts frameworks, and also at chemistry, adjusting the scope and sequence to better differentiate all levels of chemistry. In Sel Counseling, again, we have a new director. This is her first summer, Sarah Bird, to work with staff. And she extended the training that we started during the year, which was made possible by a grant from AEF, and looking at the youth mental health first aid. And we continue to train staff in youth mental health first aid. Visual arts, we have looking at the 3D curriculum, looking at ceramic and pottery, sculpture and sculpture, reintroducing ceramics to the high school and visual arts program, and strengthening other offerings in 3D curriculum. And they also worked to redesign and the ceramics and sculpture studio, which is room 206. And in world languages, we look to update curriculum for Spanish, French 3, and Mandarin 3. And that's just an overview. Like I said before at the beginning of my report, many of the work which is really done in the summertime, where teachers and curriculum leaders have an opportunity to work together to focus on updating curriculum, making sure there's alignment with the Massachusetts standards, and also looking at lessons and courses and materials to make sure that those are also aligned with their standards and the lesson, and also have an opportunity to look at lesson design. So that ends my report. Any questions?
Anyone have questions? No? Okay, I actually have a couple questions.
Sure.
Or actually, it's more, one's a question, one's a comment. One, I wish, so one of the things that would be nice about this document is to be able to share out to parents about what is being taught, I mean, what the teachers are learning, how the schools are changing to make things better for their children. And it'd be helpful to me to have something that kind of rolls it up, where it's an overview of the goals that are being addressed in the PD, or some kind of summary, so that then, you know, what the problem is that the PD's then answering, or something. Do you understand what I'm trying to say? I'm not being really eloquent.
Are you getting at to say that, like, what is the goal of the PD, that to start out, or?
Yeah, just that, why are we doing this particular PD in these particular grades for all the different things? Like, it's easier for the science, I mean, for art, that what you're trying to do is enhance the offerings, create a foundation of, I mean, create an actual curriculum. I don't know the words to explain it, but it would be helpful, rather than just having the list, but why are we doing this?
Well, you know, much of the, like I said before, much of the curriculum work is done in the summertime, and so maybe it would be better if I could answer, and maybe this will help me understand, articulate, and paraphrase what you're trying to ask. Is like, are you asking, like, why is this work prioritized in these particular grades? Why did they choose these particular grades in order to focus their summer PD?
No, I'm saying in the document.
Yes.
Rather than just have the laundry list of everything that was done, have in between the title visual arts and the bullets that were happening, what the goal was for the PD for the summer that was done. You know, why, what were you trying to do with the PD time that was then? Can anyone help me here? Does anyone else understand what I'm talking about?
I wonder if, I mean, I think what you want is something that's more public-facing, right? That you can show to parents and say, this is what we're doing, that sounds really exciting. So,
But a why?
Right, but then I wonder if we just add extra things and make it longer, it's going to be less public-facing, right?
No,
So you
I
sort of maybe rolling some of the stuff up and making it.
Right, so I think instead of grouping it by subject areas, we would group it by why. So one would be like meeting new state standards, right? So we're doing a certain number of things to update our curriculum to state standards, but not everything falls under that. Some of it, like for art, is enhancing the curriculum, right? And then we have art, you know, and 5 other things we're doing to enhance the curriculum, right?
So categorize it by topic rather than content area. Okay.
With the goal sort of describing why we're doing, you know, the topic is why we're doing those.
So more public-facing sort of document.
What's the problem that we're solving that we then solve with the PD?
Well, that's like I said, like what is the goal of the PD? So if it's to update, like I said, in social studies and history, they've updated the state standards.
Right.
And so part of the work that was done this summer in 8th grade this was an area of focus. This is where those changes happened through the state standards. So now we're focusing at 8th grade in order to update the resources, because it's more of a focus on civics.
Right.
Right, so, okay.
I guess.
Oh.
Do you understand?
Okay, Mr. Hayner.
A couple of years ago, we also had mandated PD for the teachers for retail and things of that nature. So by identifying them as meeting a requirement by the state for state standards update, for other mandates that we might have for the teachers to do, or just updating the curriculum or changing the curriculum, or sometimes we need training for the new technology that's come out, and things of that nature.
Yeah, okay. Mr. Thielman?
So my question, every year in the fall, I guess we get a report on standardized test scores. And did any of the results of those standardized test scores inform the decisions you made about the professional development you offered or required this summer?
Last fall.
Yeah, so last year's
from
results.
from the
Yeah, so the.
No,
fall
I mean,
report-
some of it is ongoing work, like, well, yes. I mean, I guess you could look at the work that was done in math.
Yeah.
Looking at the grade 9.
Correct.
Trying to make sure that all kids are a certain track for math. So we're looking at eliminating curriculum B because they're looking at the state test. We see that we can pretty much predict how students are going to perform based upon those classes that they're taking in 9th grade, how they're going to perform in like the 10th grade MCAS in math. So we want to make sure that students are in a certain track in math and that they're being supported, and those students that may be on an IEP, that they're in those co-taught classes so that we're able to support their learning and they have access to that curriculum A material.
Yeah, so every fall, yeah, good. I mean, I think every fall we receive a standardized test report, and then we ask, and then the assumption is the district's going to both do a deep dive into the numbers, but also put a special emphasis on professional development for any areas where we're not performing at the level we'd like to perform at. And so, to what Kirsty was saying before, it might be helpful to say, to be pretty blatant, that, look, we're, in some of the professional development we're doing, we're addressing issues, some of the performance issues we saw in standardized test scores, or some of the deficiencies, or the achievement gap, or whatever it is. That might be helpful to know.
Yeah.
Well, like I said before, when I started out, I said that there was a focus on Tier 1 instruction. So a lot of these updates in the curriculum, that is the thing that we're trying to do. We're trying to make sure that our Tier 1 instruction is robust and rigorous. So that's where all kids have access to that general education curriculum. And so we're trying to make sure that it's aligned with state standards. And so we're making sure that we go back and we're revisiting that. And that's where you can get the bulk of that work done in the summertime. So looking, and yes, we can use, I can attach it to, okay, this is what our findings are from looking at this assessment data. And so this is what we're trying to do.
Yep. Okay.
Does that answer your question?
Yeah, it's not so much a question, it's more that it would be helpful to have a document which is formatted differently that gives the question or the problem that was trying to be solved, and then the PD that helped address it.
May I?
Yes.
It's just like what we're doing with the goals, is regrouping them in a different way. I think it's helpful to see it by department, but I also see your point, is that you could take all of this and say, okay, what were you trying to, what were you addressing?
Yeah.
And it could be standardized tests. And actually, some of the goals have to do with that in terms of reading for this year. And in fact, we could take even all of the action plans for this year and regroup them by categories as well. But, so it's possible to take this and look at it, so you would have alignment with state standards, which is important. You could have, increased vertical alignment of our curriculum. Another could be just general enhancement of the of arts curriculum in general, for more access for students. So we could get some of those broad categories and then just take the whole list and then resort them in different ways so you can see it through a different lens.
Yeah, but I just want to say, it looks like a lot of great work was done this summer by the teachers. So I don't want it to be misconstrued. I think they did great work, and you guys did great work this summer. A lot of important work was done, but I think it might be a different way to frame it.
And I actually think that Dr. Bodie, as she alluded to, if maybe if we looked at the goals.
Yeah.
And because there is a professional development aspect of the goals that have been articulated in the document that we presented.
Yeah.
And so I think that would also maybe be helpful if we said that this is the culminate, this is where that work is being done, and this is this particular, this is the goal that can be attached to. And here's the evidence that as to why we're working on, why we chose this particular grade level and why we're doing it. Because it's kind of broad, but then you can hone it down to various grade levels. You can say this is the assessment data that we utilize in order to focus on. Is that?
Yep, very good.
Yeah.
No, I'm good. Yep.
Okay. Okay, thank you. Oh, Mr. Schuck.
Yeah, I mean, the thing is that I have trouble reading this critically as I'm in the business, I do this every day. And I always go, yeah, this makes perfect sense. And so listening to my colleagues here probe a little more is instructive. My thinking is that if the request is for context, this is what we did, this is why we chose to do this, and this is what the outcomes would, our expected outcomes. What you may see in your classroom next year that's different as a result of us doing this. So that anyone who wants to take the time to go through there and see what are they doing in grade 4 can go through and scroll through and see what new things might be happening in their child's classroom.
So what I could do is I can come up with some different templates, and then I can present them to you, and then you can say, is this something that'd be okay? I mean, I can come up with some drafts.
Yeah.
So I'm
That'd be
just
great.
making sure that
Sure.
I'm on the same page, and
Yeah.
then you can look at it and say, oh, this is exactly what we're asking. Does that sound?
Yeah.
Yeah, that'd be great.
Okay.
Thank you. And yeah, I mean, all of it looks really good. It's just, I'm trying to make a picture of it, and I have a hard time because I don't know why all the pieces are, it's like trying to build a puzzle without knowing what the picture of the puzzle was.
Well, the goal is to focus on Tier 1 instruction. So that is the overarching, if you want to look for a theme, it's like, because Tier 1 instruction is going to reach all students. So we want to make sure that that's at a certain level of excellence. And so as Allison talked about the multi-tiered supports, so we want to make sure that if students are being referred to or need extra support, that our Tier 1 instruction is where we want it to be. And then that's why we continue to have that maintenance and revisit certain grade levels to make sure that Tier 1 instruction is strong and robust.
So I guess part of what I see my job is as a school committee member is taking the work that you guys are doing and going back to the people who I see regularly and saying, like, look, they're doing really great work. Tier 1 instruction, multi-tiered stuff doesn't mean very much to the people who I bump into regularly. Right. So it would be exciting to be able to, as Mr. Schlickman was saying, sort of be like, well, I mean, grade 4 did X. I have a 4th grader. Oh, look, isn't that interesting? Now this email makes more sense.
Gotcha.
Which is so.
So yeah, I'll come up with some templates and then.
And you're already begun that work. I'm sitting here, we've spent quite a bit of time this week talking about that exactly, that both with the district-wide data team, how you're doing that, but also in how we want to maybe present the goals and the work, and that we'll do on another night because I couldn't get the presentation up. But looking at them and tying them, like you said, what is the student outcome that we're looking for, and why is that action step? What outcome is that going to lead to? So that work's already begun.
Mm-hmm.
But you didn't get to see it. So.
Okay. Yeah, great.
Okay.
Thank you. Okay, so moving on, Superintendent's report, Dr. Bodie.
I guess there's just one comment I would make as we're doing this discussion. I think that it's a challenge to figure out how we can take what is a very complex organization with lots going on and have a narrative that's simple.
Yeah.
It's really challenging.
Yeah.
And we've talked about that with goals. So we could go into having some very simple goals, but that would not even begin to touch the surface of all that is going on. But then as soon as you bring all that forward that is, it then's complex, and it's messy, and it's hard to digest. So it's a challenge. So we're happy to hear your feedback in terms of how to maybe make this a little bit clearer. So having said that, we've got a lot going on, just even on the physical level of things, and that is our buildings. And, you know, Mrs. Thielman is chair of our Arlington High School building, and we've all been discussing a lot about where we are in this next phase. So the big news, and we've had press releases about it, is that we, at the August 29th meeting, the MSBA, Massachusetts School Building Authority meeting, the Board of Directors have moved Arlington into the schematic phase. And so what does that mean? It means that we're at the stage now where we're going to get more detail about the design, the new school that was the preferred option. We're going to develop a budget that's going to be able to lead us to a project funding agreement. And that's all going to be happening in the next few months. And so there's a lot of work going on to both do the work as well as communicate the work, to get feedback from people. And first of all, I want everybody to know that the meetings of the high school building committee are open, and we're starting to see more people come. I think as people become aware that this is really moving, we're seeing more activity. And we already have some forums that are scheduled for this fall. The first one is September 24th. Mm-hmm. And at that particular forum, we're going to be looking at the site and traffic and the green space and just more of the whole siting of it. As we move into the October, we'll be looking more at the presentation of the exterior of the building, and then as we get into the November one, we'll be looking at the interior. So there's a logic to it, how it moves forward. We're going to have a Town Day booth this Saturday, and so look for the group. I think we're down where all the town committees are, and we're going to have a lot of information for people, and members of the building committee will be there for questions. That will be one of our big outreaches in the next couple of days. And as chair, and you've been sort of leading and focusing all this, you might want to say a few words about all this.
Yeah, well, I think Kathy summarized everything we're doing. I think it's important for people to understand there's 19 people on the building committee, and everyone is divided into subcommittees and working very hard and putting in a lot of time and hours. The meetings are open to the public. We encourage people to come. The next meeting is Monday. We usually have them on Tuesdays, but the next meeting is Monday, September 17th, this Monday at 6 p.m. because of the Jewish holiday. Then we meet again on Tuesday, October 2nd, and we have our public hearing, public meeting. So we're trying to gather as much input as possible. There's been some discussion in the community about a couple of issues. Cost. That's going to take some time to work itself out, and that's going to happen over the next couple of months. And then there's been some questions raised by people who supported the option of keeping the historical buildings here at the high school and having a larger front lawn, which is, for all practical purposes, alternative one. And so we're certainly listening to that group and trying to incorporate their thoughts and feelings into the design process. And so we're trying to be as open to input as possible, and the architects are working on a schedule. The MSBA schedule moves quickly. One of the things you find is once you're in this process, it moves very quickly. So there's a lot of work for the committee to do over the next several months. I don't know if anyone has any questions. You want to get into that? No. Okay.
Well, and thanks to Dr. Allison Ampe, that we do have, and Amy Spear, who is the chair of the communications subcommittee. There is a website, and there's a lot of information on the website, and there's been an update to it just to make it more easily organized for people. So it's ahsbuildingproject.org.
I do want to say...
I'm sorry, what did I say?
ahsbuilding.org.
Yeah,
ahsbuilding.org.
And I've looked at other websites when we were putting up, when Kirsty and Amy Spear were putting together this website, we looked at other websites, but ours is far superior in terms of, it has a lot more detail than I've seen in other sites. So
that is true.
A lot more detail, yeah.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So I counted last year that you had 19 main meetings, plus a whole bunch of subcommittee meetings. So I want to thank the committee for your incredible work. I also want to say to the community that I know it can be frustrating, that it feels like decisions are being made and you don't know, because frankly, not everyone has time to go to the 19 meetings plus all the subcommittee meetings.
Right.
But if you were to have gone to them, you would see a very careful, thoughtful process. And I think the issues that are raised in the community, I haven't seen one that wasn't considered by the committee thoughtfully and carefully. And I don't think that you're missing something. I think people might weigh things differently. Different people weigh things differently, but it's not that things aren't being missed by the community.
Thank you.
Thanks. So on the cost issue, we have a unique project in that we have a large administrative office space that other communities don't have. And we also have a preschool, which is combined into the same project, which just muddles the waters somewhat. So to the extent that those costs can be itemized separately in future communications, that might be helpful. And I also want to give advice to my colleagues that are on the committee that from my perspective, I mean, looking at these numbers, we're going to hit 1,900 in that building very quickly. And, there's going to be a lot of pressure to get the cost under 300 or some other magic number. And I just hope everybody keeps in mind that, we added the extra science room because we know these numbers are coming. And so I hope that we can hold the line against some of those pressures. Thanks.
It would be helpful if you could come to our meeting
Sure. Yep.
and bring this up and maybe PowerPoint and stuff.
Public participation is at 6 o'clock.
Okay, Monday, all right.
Welcome to come and, I think it's important
Yeah.
for people to hear that, I
It'd be
really
good
do.
to hear.
But it's also important that we can't just add rooms. That there's a design number for the school, and there are guidelines by MSBA in terms of the number of spaces you can have, and the rooms have to be at 85% utilization, which is a high percent. I mean, when you're dealing with lots of a high cost for these buildings, it's important that there's a consistency across the state. So I think there are some spaces that there's some options on for sure. The committee has leaned toward having a bigger gymnasium. It's allowed, but the portion that's larger than the guidelines, that portion of it is borne by the town.
Right.
And so if that is something that people want to shave off money, then you have to go back to the guidelines. But in terms of classroom spaces, we're really within very, very definite guidelines.
There's an extra science room, there's an extra art room.
Yep.
They're within the guidelines. They're definitely within the guidelines. We can't exceed the guidelines.
Yeah, I mean.
There's some gray area with the guidelines, and it spits out one number, but you can, if you read the fine print, you can gray up to another number. We're above the number the spreadsheet spits out. We're within the gray area number.
We're in the gray area, right, but.
I mean, in terms of price, in terms of cost, once the design gets to a point where we lock into or agree to a square footage, that's the number one determinant of the cost. So we're not there yet, but we could be close to that by the end of the calendar year. And that'll give everyone in the town pretty clear guidance on where we are in price.
Okay.
Am I missing it? Yeah. Okay, yeah. Come to the meetings, they're a lot of fun.
But those aren't the only building projects we have going on.
Yes, that's right,
And fortunately, we're starting to whittle them down, though. Thompson is opening without their modulars. This is great. Grass is even growing, which is great. It's not exactly your lawn, but it is green, and that's good, because we don't have an irrigation system there, though our custodians have been pretty good about trying to get it watered. Hardy is on schedule, and the that project is a project entirely on the town and is being overseen by the Permanent Town Building Committee. And the plan is not veered from that it's going to be completed by early December. And the plan for the school district then is to do the transition, move in during the first winter break. So that when students come back from that, the classrooms will have been moved and the spaces reutilized. But what has really turned out to be a surprise, and it's just terrific, is what happened with the cafeteria. I would encourage you all, if you have a chance to stop by at some point, by taking out that stage, it really has made a big difference in terms of how open the cafeteria is, and they're already seeing how it's a real space more than even just a perception of space.
Can you just talk a little bit about the Lake Street playground? Because I walked by it the other day and it looks awesome.
Yeah.
It is. It is.
I mean, it's
awesome.
not ready yet, but it's close.
I thought it was ready this week, I thought.
Oh, maybe.
At the end of the week, we got pushed back. Well, there was a little bit of a problem. It was planned to be ready for the start of school, but they discovered in the digging that there was some wires there that they didn't expect to have there, and so that put everything back in terms of what needed to be accomplished. But the Lake Street Playground is going to be terrific, and they will be opening it up very soon.
Yeah, hopefully next week.
When does the fence go up? New fence?
The new fence?
Yes.
I don't know if we decided on what the fence is going to be. I'm not sure that's happened yet, but we'll look at that.
Okay.
I know, people don't like the netting piece.
It looks awful. But the playground looks great.
The playground will be great.
Yeah.
Right. I don't think I'm not sure we've decided on what the fence is going to be, actually. That's one issue. But the main focus was getting the playground ready so that there would be that place for kids. Gibbs, I don't want to say it's a firm date, but it looks like we're going to have the ribbon cutting ceremony and open house on Sunday the 30th. It looks like it's passing enough of the gauntlet in terms of when people can be available for that. So there'll be a public announcement on that very soon, and we definitely want to have people come in and see this building. Anybody who's gone in is just, laudatory about how beautiful it is. It really is quite beautiful. And I think there's been some spectacular changes. I think the biggest one for me is the black box. I've been in that for many events, and there was a stage in there, and I don't think with the stage the way it was, and just how dark it was, nobody could appreciate how spectacular this space is, and it is. You should see the screen that's been put up. It's fabulous. The acoustics are on 4 points, and it's wonderful. We're using the room. We're using the room in double purposes through the day. We don't want this room to lie fallow during the day. We're doing fax classes in there, and also that's where the 140 chorus is in the morning. That's how many students signed up for chorus. And
Grade course, 140 kids.
140 kids.
66.
Well, the orchestra and band are fairly large, too. So it's great. A big emphasis on music. But the classrooms are wonderful. The space in the library is terrific. I was in there today, and one of the things that kids have is a reading block. And I was in the media center, the library, and they're just quietly reading. It was lovely. Mm-hmm. So there's still little things that need to be done. There is a punch list, and I'm going to add a couple more things to the punch list after my visit today, but it's good. It's really good.
Is there any possibility of getting any more bike racks there? what I'm hearing, which is amazing, what I'm hearing, and these are 11-year-old reporters, so I haven't, but what they're saying is that the racks are just chock-a-block with bikes, and there's no way to like get more bikes in, which is amazing, because it means kids are riding their bikes to school, and that's awesome, because it's fewer cars going down Mass Ave, but maybe, I don't know if there's any possibility of coming up with any other place, and also like confirm with an adult this is actually an issue.
Right, I noticed they were full.
I'm just saying, like, but like it's believable. So
Oh, they are full. I will attest that they were full
Okay.
when I was there today. They're full. Something that we can look into. Not quite sure where they would go, but we can look into it.
It's a good civics lesson. The kids learn the problems of parking in Arlington.
no, but we just don't want them to have problems
take 'em long
riding
to
their
figure that
bikes.
one out.
We want them to ride their bikes.
We want them to ride the bike.
Oh, we want the zero to, yeah.
Okay.
We want to encourage that.
Okay. So that's it on the building piece. There was a request to have a little bit of discussion tonight about the online registration and the rollout of that. So,
Sorry.
should I put my shield up? I've had it,
The kindergarten?
No. This is about we developed requests for parents to fill out, update their
yes.
information in the portal. And we have 2,000 families that have completed it. We still have people who haven't, mostly at the elementary. And in part, I think that's because I don't think elementary parents see the need for updating their information. When you register for school, the very first time, your information is put into Power School, parent information, phone numbers, email addresses. But for most people, those can change. And we don't know that they've changed, and that's why there's a parent portal, so you can go in and change that information. When that information is changed, then what happens is it's uploaded into Power School and then replaces the information that's there. If your information is outdated, what happens when a message goes out on School Messenger, which is our Power School method of communicating, you're not going to get it because it's going to go to what's ever in Power School. So it's important to go into the portal and update. Now, when you first register a child, you can copy the information so you don't have to re-enter it for every student. But that's not true in the portal. It doesn't. It copies whatever is in Power School, but it won't. If you change your form, it won't copy it for your other child.
No, it did something even weirder.
Okay.
For me, it copied the phone numbers and the relationships, but not the names. So it had a blank, and it said aunt, and it had the correct phone number for the second child. So the reason
been renamed?
I'm sorry, no, it was really, and I think it didn't port over my husband either, but it gave his phone number. So the reason I asked to have this added was that I know I had a number of problems, and I heard about a lot of other people having problems, and I wanted to know, how do you want to have these problems collected and transmitted so that they can be fixed, so that next year when this happens, we don't have these problems?
Yep, give me a list of things and I will pass them on to the people in the IT department that have set this system up.
Okay, and I'm not the only one who had problems? Okay,
So
Ms. Morgan.
just to be clear, so I have 4 kids. I filled out 4 health forms. I actually fill out the form and then photocopy it and then change the child's name on it. So I filled out 4 health forms. The teachers also, at least at the elementary level, tend to ask for all of the same information because they either don't have access to this. So I filled out for my 3 elementary kids, I filled out all of my name, address, phone number, husband's name, like all that kind of stuff 3 times for all of those teachers. I filled out the, like, all of the school information form, and then also at the elementary level, they collect, because the PTO directory can't access a lot of the school information, you then have to fill out all of that again in paper format, so we're up to it's incredible. And then I also needed to fill out all of the same identifying information for my daughter's advisor at the Gibbs, which is great. I mean, I of course want all these people to be able to get in touch with me, but the amount of replication of what seems to me, I want to know, and it also, I think the other piece is, it's a hassle, but it also makes people worried, because I want to feel confident that if a phone call was made and somebody couldn't reach me to take my child home, that there would be some iteration through a chain of command whereby eventually they would get my husband or my father or somebody would come to get my kid. And because you're inputting this, no joke, 5-6 times in different places, you start to be like, oh gosh, is this really gonna is the nurse gonna be able to get a hold of me, right? I think the answer is yes, but it doesn't breed confidence. So,
True question. So when you say we're filling this out, were you doing on paper?
yes.
Well, the whole idea of this is not on paper.
I know, that's what I thought too. But we still get the nurse's form on paper, we still get the teacher form,
Yeah, that we still got on paper, the nurse's form still.
we still get the.
on Power
No, it was on Power
It's
School.
supposed to, everything is supposed to be going electronic. Now, maybe we're having transition problem,
Yes.
but
So
there was a
We are
problem with
having
the
a
health
transition
form this year, and it was, nobody caught it until somebody brought it to my
Yeah,
attention,
right.
that there was required on certain fields, and they weren't required. What parents are required to do is to let us know if your child has a life-threatening allergy of some sort, but you don't have to have it necessarily in the portal. You can call your school nurse up and let them know that way. So but none of those fields were required. They were optional, so we got rid of those right as soon as we came to our attention. It was just a mistake that happened. But no, the whole idea is that we're going electronically, so you don't fill out those cards at school.
So many cards.
Cards.
No,
Okay.
in a pot, yeah.
Okay, so that's
All
one
right,
thing.
but this is helpful to
Mr.
know. All right, so many
Mr.
cards.
Yeah, so
Carden.
that's the thing, is that the system, there's issues with the system, but it also was the rollout issue. So it wasn't entirely clear, the message wasn't clear, even to your staff, the nurses, that this was all going electronic, because all the nurses sent out the form, not all, but most of them sent out the form on paper to be filled out. It also wasn't clear to the parents that this new system was new and was supposed to replace paper. So there was Maryland sent out a somewhat bungled, confusing message over the summer that said, go into the portal and do the student update. Well, for many elementary school parents, they had never been in the Power School portal because they don't use it for grades, they don't use it for anything. So they didn't even know how to get into the portal. So that caused a lot of confusion and calls to different people, school secretaries, nobody was around for the summer, how do I get in? David Good was called by several people. So the rollout was bungled in that the new process wasn't introduced. A way to get your access, if you've never accessed the system before, wasn't explained. And then it wasn't available for a while. I don't know, there were other system issues. So I think, you have a lot of parents on the committee. We're happy to look at draft communications. I know Marilyn is, she knows the system and she may not understand why people are so confused. We're happy to review communications that are going out about new technology and new systems, because it just, was
Problematic.
Yeah.
So we will send comments to you. I was talking more of the online system, but I think your comments are also good. And I'd like to see it improved the next
How
time.
does everybody want to see it
Yeah,
improved?
okay.
Yeah.
Mr. Schlickman.
This can be painful rolling out, and one of the things you have to watch out for is definitely ask people, be alert if they change your cell phone number. Because otherwise, somebody's in Cambridge or Dedham or someplace is going to get a cell phone call at 5 o'clock in the morning telling them that the Arlington Public Schools are closed.
True.
Trust me, this happens a lot in Lowell.
Okay. All right.
Is that it? Anything
That's
else?
it.
Okay, great. So moving on, consent agenda. All items listed with an asterisk are considered to be routine and will be enacted by one motion. There will be no separate discussion of these items unless a member of this committee so requests, in which event the item will be considered in its normal sequence. Approval of warrant number 18266, total amount $927,123.42, dated 6/21/18. Warrant number 18275, total amount $341,996.17, dated 6/29/18. Warrant number 19012, total amount $333,977.55, dated 7/31/18. Warrant number 19023, total amount $503,555.90. Okay, I think this must be a typo, and 97 cents, dated 8/16/18. And warrant number 19033, total amount $626,697.17, dated 9/5/18. And approval of minutes, regular school committee, June 21, 2018 minutes, and approval of trip, California trip for foreign exchange students, April 13th through the 20th, 2019, by Mary Villano. May I have a motion?
So move.
Second?
Second.
Okay, there is no discussion. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? Okay, so that passes unanimously. Moving on, we're on to policy. Mr. Schlickman.
Wow, we just spent $2.7 million. The Policies and Procedures Committee has been meeting. We've met over the summer. We got a good start on this work with Mr. Carden when he was chair before the split. And basically what's happening with Policies and Procedures is we're going through the manual with Mike Gilbert. And for the most part, we're doing things that are ministerial in terms of adjusting the language, pulling out expired things, updating and aligning with Mass General laws. And so within the minutes, as I've been writing them up, I've reported every policy that we've looked at and which version we're going with. So that whether we're going with the MASC version or with our previous version, or if we're making some sort of a change. And so this is a very transparent and linear process. And I think the other members of the committee will concur that most of the changes we're making are relatively minor. It's housekeeping. However, we've run across a couple of places where we're proposing a new policy or making a significant change in the policy. And so that's what we have before us in the agenda here. A new policy, GBEDB, is proposed. This was highly recommended by MASC, the issue being teachers are now going to crowdsourcing and online fundraising. And there are ethics law issues that we have to align our policy with so that we consider this to be a first read. Also, policy KFD has some changes in it. And the other one was BEA, regular school committee meetings. The subcommittee voted to recommend a change from Thursday to Tuesday with the intent of implementing the policy starting in September 2019. Those are the only three things of substance we've run across. My commitment to you, and I think this is good practice, is to call your attention to things that are potentially significant change. What we're going to do is we're going to present electronically through Mr. Gilbert the proposed new policy book, so you'll be able to compare that to what we have right now and also align that up with the agendas and the minutes that we've done. So you can see what the changes are. And if you see typos, if you see wording issues, if you have questions specific to the way we've written it, the desire is to have you contact Mr. Gilbert because then you're not encountering potential open meetings, public records issues, because he's not an employee of the district and not a member of the committee. Anything of substance that is a question, obviously come back to this table and, you know, we can go back into the subcommittee and pull out one from a change and talk about it. But I don't think you're going to be seeing very many significant changes, but the ones that are of note are the ones we've presented today.
Okay. Just, what is the timing of this?
We've got 2 more sections to go. We're having a meeting toward the end of September and one in October with the hope that we can get everything on our plate and before us sometime by the end of October. And we'd like to take a vote on the revisions pretty close to that because Mr. Gilbert is planning on retiring and heading off to Florida. He's going to seek warmth and sunshine in February rather than the usual New England winter.
So I just asked that I know that this is going to be a lot to read through, that we get sort of at least 2 weekends to do
Yeah.
it.
We're putting, Mike is putting up on a web source someplace, probably on the MASC server, the changes so far, the new revisions. And I think 2 of them were in Novus. So you'll be able to read through them long before we vote to do it. But we've got 2 more meetings worth of work to do. So that's, I think, 3 sections left. I'd have to look at the minutes and the agenda. But in our minutes from the last meeting, we know which policies we've left to go through, and that's 2 nights worth of work.
Okay. So these are all for first read?
These are first reads.
Okay. Do you want comments on them?
Yeah, sure.
So I'm confused. So first read is the fundraising one. ADF is for first read too? Because I don't see the policy in my Novus, but I just have it says. Is it?
Oh, is it KFD?
That is.
That's separate.
Well, that is put here,
Yeah.
but it was supposed to be separate, but.
So I see for first read, well, okay, so here's what I see here in mine. Online fundraising and solicitations, GBEDB. Right. ADF, nutrition and wellness policy goes proposed to insert.
I forgot about that.
Where's that?
That is, ADF is also the nutrition and wellness policy goals that we put in, which essentially the proposal with
So where's that?
was to insert outdoor recess should be provided to students at times when it's not precipitating wind chills above 20 degrees.
But that's not here.
That may not be, that's not a note, so I guess we can't do a first read on that.
The regular school
I don't
committee
have the
change.
policy.
Oh, you don't?
No.
Oh.
So I think we can only do a first read if we actually have the policy.
Yeah, well, we certainly won't do that.
So
there's only one policy for first read.
Yeah, KFD is sitting here.
KFD came out of Jennifer's committee.
Yeah.
Okay, so I don't know why KFD, I don't know how
think it's there
KFD showed up, but.
I think it's there because I think you want to put all the policies under one easily accessible,
Right.
you know,
Right. You asked for
searchable
that.
place,
So you could search
and that's
for
why
it.
it's listed there.
So-
That's what my guess is.
So
Yeah.
We'll do those 2 tonight.
Let's talk about that one later.
Well, wait a
Those
minute.
were supposed to all be
KDF.
first read. Why is it not KFD?
No, it's up there.
Well, KFD didn't come through the policy.
It wasn't
It's
there.
not for first read, it's for discussion.
So it's for discussion. So I have so it seems like the online fundraising is officially before us for a
Yes.
first
For
read.
first read,
Right.
yes.
So I think that needs to be clarified in the minutes. The fundraising, the online fundraising, solicitation, crowdfunding policies before us for first read. So I wanted to ask a question about that. So
Yeah.
now that I'm clear. Kathy, I just want to make sure that this works from an administrative perspective.
Are you talking about the online fundraising?
Yeah, because it requires you to, or the district, you have final authority, I assume it's you or your designee, to have final authority to approve any online fundraising activities by school district employees and so anyone who wants to do any crowdsourcing, online fundraising, that it has to go to you, or I presume your designee. Is that, so I want to make sure this is, you are,
I don't want to have people do it in the name of the school district.
That you see.
okay.
But, so if they came to me on that, I don't think so, but if somebody did it on their own, certainly on their own personal email, I don't have any
Okay.
control over that.
Well,
But the issue of policy is that
Yeah.
we as a district need to know about it if a teacher's going out there
Yes.
and doing it.
On their own personal email.
Yeah, even so, because they're raising money for their classroom or themselves and
we own
for Arlington, and it's our,
For the classroom, but.
yeah, so it involves us in a critical issue. Now,
We need to talk-
whether it's a routine form that is approved through channels, you don't have to actually go and look at all the crowdsourcing stuff, but, we can't legally have teachers going off and raising a boatload of money off on a crowdsourcing if we don't know about it and we have no control of where that money's going.
I'm not sure how I would know about it before it happened.
Yeah, that's fine. So my
Well,
question.
that's why we have to put the policy out to the teachers to say, if you are going to crowdsource for your classroom or for yourself in the school in some way, we need to know about it.
Okay, Mr. Thielman first.
So, yeah, okay. So here's what I want to suggest. Tonight's a first reading. It seems to me that before I vote at the next meeting to approve this, I want to know what the staff says about this. I'd like to make sure that the principals have weighed in, well, especially the principals, they've weighed in, and everyone is kosher with this policy, because I do think it's a change. And I think what happens now is that teachers, in good, for good reason, they're not able to do what they want to do in the curriculum. They're impatient. I mean, they're not able to do everything they want to do in their class. They've got a great idea, and they go out and they fundraise. And, parents and other people contribute, and, great things happen, and kids learn, and it's not all terrible. It's probably mostly good. So I just want to make sure that logistically, operationally, at the district level, everyone understands this policy, the principals buy into it, and there's no confusion once it's implemented, because I'd hate to have this committee adopt something in 2 weeks and then us have chaos or not chaos, have confusion in the district.
Mr. Hanna.
That's my only point.
One of the reasons this was brought up to us by Mr. Gilbert was there's a legal ramification in this. Anything that has our name on it, directly or indirectly, and that's our employees, our buildings, any program whatsoever, we own it. And the accountability of funding, there was a whole issue on money and where that money's going and accountability. It has been lacking in public education on some of these fundraising, not done maliciously, not done to steal money or fraud, but the accountability is there. And this is part of this ethics aspect to it. If we don't have something in place like this, we're not going to be able to allow our people to raise any money within the school precincts. That's where this comes from. Now, as Mr. Thielman just said, the mechanics of this is one aspect of it. Mike has been very good in minimizing language and creating extra work for any staff members like this. So I have no problem of us checking this out and looking at this, but we also have to look, if we don't have something like this in place, it's going to potentially limit us.
The other point I want to make is this, I think it's on the floor, is I'd love to, I think this is the kind, I know that Mike does a great job and very thorough, and I know they work with attorneys at MASC, but it would be good for our own attorney, I think, to take a look at this to make sure this is kosher. I think it's just, you just want to make sure. So I would run it by our attorney and make sure the staff are good on it, and then for me, for second read, I'm fine with it, but I just want that feedback.
Okay. Mr. Schlickman, because he's chair of policy, then Ms.
Yeah, I have no problems with running any of this stuff past our town attorney. He's very good with school stuff. The issue here is that...
Not the town attorney, our attorney.
Our town attorney.
No, our school
Our
committee attorney.
school committee attorney. We can run this for, town council.
For Liz. I think Liz, no, our attorney, I want our attorney.
No,
This
town
is for
council.
employment.
No.
Yeah, town council.
Len, what do you
Yeah.
say?
Town council has an extensive background in school law.
Absolutely.
But the issue is the State Ethics Commission went to MASC and said, you guys need to understand, this is what we are going to do, and we think that you should go out to your school committees and make sure their policies are aligned with how we view the state ethics law. This is directly from the State Ethics Commission advisory opinion. So that if we decide not to do this or take something out, and it's referenced in the policy, so you can go look it up. But, you know, the thing is, if the policy that we come up with does not fulfill the requirements of the State Ethics Commission, and we've acted and messed with it, I think that we become liable as a school committee for not doing, taking care of our responsibility. We've been warned, in other words.
Okay. I want Ms. Morgan to have a chance, then we'll go back.
So so employees shall not use a crowdfunding source or set up their appeal in such a way that they're asking for donations directly from people who they have official dealings, such as parents of a student's classroom. The solicitation can say, classroom X needs tissues and crayons, but it shouldn't be directed to parents who have shared email addresses with the teacher for purposes of communicating about their student. So I can tell you that I have received, between my kids' classrooms, 3 of these kind of requests this week.
Right.
We need antibacterial soap in K3. We need books in Sarah's ELA classroom. So is that
No.
can they do that or can they not do that under this policy? That's my question.
Okay.
Okay.
I don't care who answers it.
I think,
I'm going to let Dr. Bodie answer it.
I think I'm going to ask Mr. Hine. There's, actually what caught my, is the question of what they're asking for too, that's also an issue in asking for antibacterial wipes. That's another issue involved, so.
Well, I don't want to get
gonna
into
go
the
there.
semantics of it with my kids as particular. I'm just saying that these are the kind of requests that, be they come or not come through you, as people, especially with elementary age kids, they come all the time. So I'm just trying to understand the language, because to me it reads, such as parents of students in a teacher's classroom, the solicitation can say, we need tissues and crayons, but it can't be directed to parents.
My understanding was this is about raising money to buy things.
Yes.
So what they can't do is send you an email with a link. Please go to my crowdfunding source.
Thank you.
And
Got
do
it.
this. But they can ask you for
Tissues.
stuff.
You want to bring it in?
Won't get
So
into
they're
the-
not saying, we need tissues and crayons, please donate $5. They can't do that, but they can say, bring in the
You can't go to a
tissues.
source to do it.
they
And I
can't-
don't think anybody's asking for
Either
money
one.
for this. They'll ask for those.
No, they're asking for the particular,
Right.
they're asking for specific items.
They ask you to bring in a
Okay.
box of crayons.
Mr. Cardin hasn't had a chance.
Okay, so this is specifically an MASC policy that they reviewed with their own attorneys. And certainly we can also have it go by our attorneys, and hopefully they'll come to the same conclusion. Although with all of the policy manual, there's sort of that same issue. Are you going to trust the MASC attorneys, or is everything going to be reviewed by our own attorneys? That's something we need to think about as you review all of the changes. So this is, a new policy, so maybe that's the criteria. If it's brand new, maybe we do send it out to our own attorneys. I don't know, but that's something to think about. This was explained to us as addressing the online funding. And there's a note at the bottom of the MASC policy, which isn't in our draft, which defines crowdfunding sources as being an online service used for solicitation of goods from a large number of people via the internet or other electronic networks.
It's
So-
here.
Oh, it is there?
Yeah,
Okay.
it's there.
It's there.
So an email to the class would not be prohibited by this policy. There may be other issues with that, because there are, if you take a very close read of the ethics rules, that may not be completely compliant, but that's not being addressed by this policy. So.
Okay. Mr. Thielman. I'm circling back to you.
Yeah, so I think anytime we have a new policy, we should have an attorney, whether it's Doug or, I don't understand the hesitation for using our own attorney. Maybe there's something I
Oh,
don't.
you can't, I'm not sure that it would go to our employment attorney, it could be going to our school law.
Okay, yeah,
Yeah,
so I
that
mean,
was the point.
it feels like this feels like a school law issue to me. So I do think anytime we have a new, brand-new policy we haven't seen before, I do think there's a value in having it reviewed by our own council, just to check. And then the other thing is, I just want to reiterate, I want to hear from you next week that, or 2 weeks from now, that everybody, you talked about it inside the district and everyone is clear on how to implement this. Otherwise, what are we doing? Otherwise, it's just, it's going to become very confusing.
Right. Well, we have an administrative meeting next week, and Mr. Levy, who is the president of the AEA, is sitting here tonight, and we will have a discussion ourselves about this before the next meeting.
Do any teachers do this? Okay.
Okay.
Did they crowdsource? Thanks, that's all I wanted, yeah. That's all I wanted.
I want to make two comments on the policy itself for first read. The first, in the last sentence of the third paragraph, it says, any employee seeking display of or post a photo of a student must first, blah, blah, must first secure the written consent of the student's parent or guardian. I think they need to be giving that consent to somebody. You know, they can't just keep it themselves. They need to be either giving it to Dr. Bodie or to Rob, or, you know, someone is a record keeper, right? So that's one comment. And then the second comment, the starting on the second page, it says, if a solicitation is not fully funded within the time period, there's many solicitations that don't have full requirements for full funding. So it's confusing to me what happens in that case. So just if you could look at the wording and think about that. Mr. Hayner.
The complexity of this may get to a point, and it may be easier to have a policy and not having, allowing crowdsource funding. I don't know how much we do in this system. This may be something brand new. This may be a source of income, an easy way to raise money and things of this nature. But this is involved in the ethics aspect of it and becomes very complex. You may meet the requirements of this policy, you may be violating another ethics issue down the line. So part of the thing might be to find out how much of this is going on by staff members. This only relates to staff members. If parents wanted to do this on their own, we have no control over that.
I'm not aware of any of it going on.
Yeah, I'd be curious to know how much crowdfunding is going on in Arlington. I know there are some districts, there's a lot of it.
I've seen it involved, yeah.
So I'd just be
By
curious.
staff?
Okay.
All you need is few people to start doing it.
Okay, so any other comments on the policy for first read?
No, but related. I just have a question about, you had said that if there are mistakes, that we should send to Michael Gilbert.
Yeah,
Seems
yeah.
like small things we should.
Small things, but this is
But it
the
seems
first
like-
read. This is,
No, I know, but like, you know, there's some spacing issues here. It seems like, can't we send that to Karen, or can't we send
no,
that to one?
Karen doesn't do that. That's,
Okay, or can't we send it to one member of the committee
Michael-
without?
We're
without sending her-
paying, we're paying extensive amount of money to do
All right, all
this.
right, all right,
to do
all
that.
right.
So send it
No
to
problem.
Michael Gilbert.
Yeah, okay.
Okay. Is
Off the
there,
hook, Karen.
I have a
Any-
question about so are we going to have a discussion about the moving the meetings?
That's not a first read, but it's certainly out there because the subcommittee voted 3-0 to go with the 4.
Yeah.
So if we find a fourth vote.
I know.
We should have a discussion.
No, we should,
Yeah.
I certainly wanted to call your attention to the fact that that vote was made by the policy committee and that the full committee would need to deal with it.
okay. I think we will have that as a separate agenda item at a future meeting.
Very good.
Yes.
Anything else under the policy things here? Okay.
Do you want to
Moving.
bring up?
Well,
No, I think we'll bring it up under the other context.
Okay.
yeah, okay. Moving on to subcommittee reports. Budget.
So we had another joint budget CIAA subcommittee meeting. We received the list of, what are they called, priority items that the administration put together. Dr. Bodie went over those. We had some questions. We discussed that the next step would be to put some cost estimates against those and start developing some prioritization by the administration within the group of items. And so we're meeting again in October. I don't have the date in front of me.
Is it 17th?
17th.
7 PM?
17th at 7.
That's right.
Okay. I had a question about the joint, about this thing. If non-subcommittee members have ideas of things that weren't covered, should I or we or whoever, I have some, so should we send it, could we send it to the chairs and to the superintendent? Okay,
Yeah.
I'll do that.
Len's doing the minutes for the meetings.
Yeah, I mean, I think,
Above here.
yeah, I mean, I think we didn't get that in advance, so we didn't really have time to, as a committee, to really, as a subcommittee or a joint subcommittee, to really think about and digest what was included. So I do think, maybe at the next meeting, that'll be an opportunity for us to give some input on what's missing or what's in there that we don't think maybe shouldn't be a priority, or giving some feedback. You were there. We didn't really give any feedback because it was new.
Yeah.
But
And our next meeting is October 17th?
17.
Right, and
so-
we will plan to get you something ahead of time so you can digest it a bit before the next meeting.
Okay. Community relations.
Yes, we had a meeting on the 11th, a bunch of things. The administration is, in conjunction with the union, I guess, is working on a very short survey to go out to people on calendar changes, both to teachers and to parents. And we looked at it and gave our thoughts. This is a administration effort, and the idea is if there are some clear results from that survey that we would want to revisit calendar issues, we would bring that to community relations first, bring it to the general committee, and see where we're going to go. So that was first. I'm going to put the after school last. We have a suggested schedule for office hours that we'll want people to look at and approve of. What we've done is we've tried to make it so that no person had to do more than 2 office hours, because previously, so I eliminated some of the low turnout months, so hopefully that will be helpful. I am embarked in this effort, Karen's been helping me a little bit on what our appointments are to the various committees out there. And so I'm trying to get a clear list of who we have appointing authority to, who's in there now, what their timing is, because I feel like it's been sort of a little all over the place. So I hope to bring that to you guys in, maybe a month. Mr. Thielman mentioned some, under new business, they've received correspondence from Rachel Oliveri, the Green Team Coordinator, about using green products of teachers and parents sending in non-green products that potentially violated a policy of ours. We had a discussion, it wasn't clear it violates a policy, but we agreed to sort of discuss it further, whether we should have more education to the community about what products are green, what products aren't, and education to teachers. And then the big thing we worked on last year, and we'll continue to work on this year, is issues involving after-school care. As you know, our district is growing, and not just growing in the classroom, it's also growing in the need for after-school care. And the waiting list numbers are much bigger in the last 3 years than they've ever been. And also new is the fact that the other programs that are outside, so like the Boys and Girls Club and Fidelity House and stuff, also have big numbers. So this has sort of become a crisis in the last few years. So a bunch of parents have gone to us to ask us to take this on and talk about it. One of those results is the possible suggestion that we change policy KFD. And unfortunately, the policy isn't red line. The addition isn't in red, which would be helpful. But I was wondering if I could throw it to Jeff what the new changes are. He could just walk us through them.
Yeah, so
these are all for discussion. These are
Yeah,
not,
so So the parents who came to us, first and foremost, and there's a lot of them, would like more extended day programs because they're working parents, and I think we all know that's an issue. And then the second thing is they did some of their own surveys, and the subcommittee felt the district should be providing information to the public on what we have for extended day programs. And then the other thing is that there was some confusion about surplus space, and so this addition adds a sentence at the end of the first paragraph that defines surplus space. Surplus space is defined as classrooms, common areas, auditoriums, recreation space, and other areas that are available outside of the normal school day. And then the second paragraph there is all new. It is the committee's intent that surplus space be utilized to allow as many families as possible to access extended day services. By May 1st each year, the superintendent is required to present to the school committee a report. This is what the public wanted to see. This is what, everyone, to have some transparency, on the number of students in extended day programs in the district's surplus space, the number of students on waiting lists for these programs, and the availability of surplus space within the district to accommodate the needs of families requesting extended day services. And then the policy remains the same. It's not in the MASC policy book. It's something that Arlington put in several years ago, and I believe it was put in because we have all these after-school programs. The policy also requires that by December 31st each year, that's already in the policy, the after-school programs, the extended day programs have to give us a report on their finances. And then John has pointed out that actually by law, we have to put this out for bid every year. Do I have that correct? That these contracts need to go out for bid on a yearly basis?
It can be for multiple years, but.
It can be for multiple years, right. But so all this change does is clarify what surplus space means, and then require a report by May 1st, because that's what we think. We can't really mandate an after-school program. We can only get information.
Okay.
So can we solicit thoughts from, or
Anyone have comments on?
I don't know if anyone has thoughts or.
Okay, so I'm a little,
So here's the dilemma for the committee. We can either assume this is a first read and move forward for a second read, or send it to policies and procedures to talk more. It doesn't matter. It does not. I think we were agnostic on it.
Yeah.
Subcommittee is agnostic. Whatever the board wants to do is fine with me.
okay.
Fine with us.
What does policy think?
We'll look at it as we're going through the book, and I think that something like this we'd also want town council to look at.
Good, yeah. So we have, just so everyone's aware, when will this process, because those of us on the subcommittee often get emails from parents about extended day. So my answer is going to be, we're working on a policy.
right?
And then
Yeah.
it'll be done.
All the policy revisions, including this, should be done by the end of the calendar year.
They went in effective, then
Yeah.
this May, they'd get a,
So that, obviously, you're targeting actions to happen in the spring. The policy will be in place by next spring.
I want to go home. Yeah, and so when do these have to go to bid? When do you do the bidding? When's that going to happen?
We probably want to do it in January, so.
Yeah, we're going to do it in January.
so,
Yeah.
so another thing that we talked about is some suggestions to the administration about things that could be included in our RFP. I'm not sure if you saw that yet. But one of the frustrations of parents is that different after-schools have different amounts of information available publicly online, different amounts of responsiveness, and so we want to sort of set up our expectations of what every program in Arlington has to do. Has to have a certain amount of information on a web page. It doesn't have to be a beautiful web page. It can be a quick and dirty web page, but someplace on a web page, setting out some criteria. It also has to communicate to parents if a child isn't admitted, where they are on the waiting list. Are they number 5? Are they number 40? Because that's been a big frustration with parents. And so these are suggestions to the administration, but hopefully we'll take that to heart to go out when they do the bid to sort of require certain level of standards. I think all the programs should have.
Something to consider, for the committee to consider, is that if we're going to go out to bid in January, they're going to want to know that the superintendent is required by May 1st every year to require, it's not essential, but that they're going to be under some scrutiny, that their information is going to be under some scrutiny. So I don't know if that impacts the bidding process, it may not.
Well, the bid would really be for the following year. It
Yeah,
would be
we-
for September of 19.
Right,
Yeah.
right.
But
Yeah.
when they're bidding for it, they would want to know that this could be the policy, so.
Wouldn't it be part of the bid? I mean.
Yeah, whatever
That's
we're
the
going to
idea.
require, we're going to want.
So you put it in the policy,
We would
yeah.
put it in.
Well, no, it'd be in the bid.
It'd be in the bid, so
Yeah.
you would attach the policy to the bid, is that what you?
No, we would say whatever information we're going to require.
Yeah,
We would just
okay.
want to outline that in both the RFP and the contract.
All right, so,
I know.
okay.
Oh,
And certainly in the RFP, you'd want to have some sort of preference will be given to bidders who will provide whatever amenities or situations we want. Off the top of my head, I'd say priority be for folks who accommodate more people and be able to provide a better service to the parents. Because if we've got one bidder looking to take up space for 15 kids, and another bidder's coming in will service 30, obviously, there's a community advantage to the person who's going to service more children.
I think the specific reason why you would do an RFP and not a bid.
Yeah. RFP, yeah.
okay.
So I just want to say to the public, the millions watching, that this is a big issue. This is a long-term process. We are not going to solve this problem overnight, but we are still working on it. Communication issues are the easiest to solve, frankly, right? So that's, hopefully, we should get that done soon. But space issues are big, and we are going to continue to work on this very hard, but it's going to take some time.
So the policy's really about communication. That's really what we're talking about in the policy. So I just want to make sure it doesn't get, I think this is a fine process. I just want to make sure it doesn't get lost in the process. And I also want to, this is an important issue for a lot of parents in the
Yes.
town, and I think we just have to
Yeah.
prioritize this.
So I had one comment on this. I'm not sure, it's not really first read, but I'm confused actually by the idea of surplus space, especially if you're defining it as classrooms, common areas and stuff that are available outside the normal school day, because it's unclear to me that all classrooms are available or not, and whether that actually gets into a contractual issue, having the classrooms available or not.
You've heard it doesn't. It's not a contractual issue. It's a.
It's,
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, remember you were talking about this, yeah.
it's not a contractual issue, but we do have teachers who stay after school,
Right.
who want to work in their rooms
Right.
in order to prepare for the next day. So, I mean, there's nothing specifically written in the contract. I think it's just something that we have to consider as we talk about the convenience and the work ethic of our teachers. We have very hardworking teachers who would like to stay in their room, especially at the elementary level, to prepare for the next day.
I think there's also an aspect of it, and not knocking anybody in how they treat the room, but the room has to be in condition to be used the next day as well. So that's a factor too, when people.
That goes to
when a
consideration.
classroom's used as a secondary purpose too.
Right, so if they set the classroom up the way that they want it, if they have a project going on or something of that
Right,
nature.
Exactly.
So, I mean, I think the benefit of the May 1 report is that the superintendent or you, whoever writes the report, would say this many, we have this many students in extended day programs. We're using this many classrooms in the district. We have a certain number of teachers who work in their classrooms to get ready for the next school day, and we value that. And as a result, we have X number of available space that isn't being used right now, district-wide, that an extended service day provider could occupy.
I think also has to go in there is that the state has to come in and you have to get certification that you can utilize that space, right?
Yeah, and for the ones that aren't run by Arlington.
The ones that are not run.
The ones that are not run by Arlington have to be
Ones that-
certified. Yep.
Arlington's different, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Can I have a motion then about the office hours, or do we need that? I mean, do we need a motion to approve those dates for office hours?
So moved.
Okay.
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor?
Yes.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay.
Okay,
that's
I'll send out a
unanimous.
doodle soon.
curriculum.
Well, so we met this summer to review the district goals, which we just went through and you saw in Novus. And, the progress made on the objectives over the summer. We also had a conversation with the Superintendent's Diversity Advisory Council. And, the long and the short of it is that there was a conversation about going through a process of changing or amending the policy, the goals, the district goals, to have a separate goal on cultural competency, or to put the word cultural competency more explicitly into the goals. And what we decided to do was just let's see how this year goes. Mm-hmm. Let's see how FY19 goes. Cultural competency is in every single goal in one way or another. And so let's see. So rather than spend all of our time and energy on rewriting something that's going through a lengthy process, let's take the year to see how it goes.
Facilities?
There is work going on to look at renovating the Pierce Playground, and hopefully we'll have a meeting sometime at the beginning of October to discuss that. John's working on that with the facilities director. So as soon as they set that up, I'll send out a doodle to the group.
Policy?
Can I just make one comment just on Mr. Hayner? So did anything come up? I've heard from a couple of parents that the swings at the playground are broken. Is that part of the?
I'll defer to John on that.
Do we know anything about the Pierce swings?
Swings being broken.
Okay.
I'll look into it. Thank you.
They're broken.
You basically have
I'll get on
what we have, unless you want to know that
Seriously.
the future meeting section J is September 24th at 5 o'clock right here. And sections K and L is October 17th, 5 o'clock right here.
Great. Legal services?
Nothing
review?
at this time.
High school building, you've already heard about. Gibbs committee?
The parent committee hasn't met. Is it your intention, Dr. Bodie, to reconvene that parent advisory group for the Gibbs, or unclear? We can keep it on the list for now. And
It's unclear. I think the hope is that some members of that committee would be willing to be on the school council.
sure, yeah, possibly, yeah.
Yeah.
I think it might be nice to meet one more time just to provide some feedback about the opening, and,
Great
I think that, these are parents who are pretty keyed into their kids' communities, and it may make sense just to have a
debrief. I think it would be helpful. We've been compiling a list in different categories of things that we've learned, and so that next year we don't have those issues. So it would be great to hear from the parents. So I will suggest that to principal.
And say thank you to them,
Yeah.
to the people who've been serving. If you're going to,
Yeah.
delete the committee, it'd be nice to say thanks for the work that they put into
I
it.
didn't think we had got to the point where we were going to say we were going to delete the committee. I honestly hadn't thought about deleting the committee at this point, but I think that that's a good point to debrief. Where I think we've just been in the
That seems reasonable to,
very
like,
intense time, but yes, I think that we would
put it
like
off
to get
for a
feedback.
little while, but.
We would like to get feedback. Well, as well as fresh in people's minds too would be helpful.
Okay. Any liaison reports, announcements, or future agenda items? Mr. Hayner.
I have a couple of announcements. Bridging Two Communities, which are Medco students and their Arlington friends, will be having their first social event of the year by going apple picking to Honey Pot Hill Orchards in Stowe, Mass. on Saturday, September 22nd at 10 a.m. And this is a little ahead of time. I'll probably mention it again. The Children's Room will be having their 15th annual Memories Walk on October 15th. I would recommend people go to the Children's Room webpage, childrensroom.org, for more details. Thank you.
Dr. Seuss?
Yes, I would like to do a community dinner with Arlington Eats on November 8th, and I know not everyone's going to be available, but if you are going to be available, if you're not, can you just send me an update? We'll see if we can get enough people. They're waiting for us, so I want to get back to them. I also want to make an agenda request. I made this last year, but it was probably too early. Sometime this year, it'd be great to see an update of the 8th grade curriculum. social studies, sorry, let me specify, the social studies 8th grade curriculum. And what I understood, and I might be completely wrong, is that what we're doing goes a little bit beyond just the state requirements, but we're sort of being really, a little more innovative, but I could be wrong about that. But anyway, I know that there's big changes coming, and it'd be great to see it.
November 8th is, oh, sorry, never mind.
No,
Go ahead.
6th.
I can't read a calendar.
Could I make
Move
one
on.
more announcement? Town Day is Saturday.
Yes.
I invite everybody to come. It's a phenomenal time. The weather's supposed to be great. Come and enjoy.
Mr. Carden.
As an agenda item, it can be part of the superintendent's next report or a separate item, but I'd like to hear about the impact of the closing of youth villages on the district.
I'm sorry, Len, can you say that again?
The closing of the impact of the closing of youth villages on the district.
Okay. Anything else, Mr. Hayner?
Administrative positions. Do you want me to be more specific? Vacancies.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Did you have something?
I have another announcement.
Okay.
So on Sunday, the 23rd, Mothers Out Front, Sustainable Arlington, and the Town of Arlington is hosting an event on painting the town green. It's talking about steps that the town has taken so far to become a more green community, steps that they are thinking about taking, future plans, and there's going to be music and food and speeches, a video, so it should be a lot of fun. It's at Town Hall.
Okay. Okay, so at this point,
Can I mention one other thing? Have you done any announcements?
yeah, sure.
Okay. There was a conflict with Pierce and Gibbs open house, and so Pierce is moving their open house till October 18th. So there is no conflict.
Okay, so at this point, we're going to go into executive session. Do we need to return?
Yes.
We do. Okay, so we're going to return after executive session to our regular session. We're going in to conduct strategy sessions in preparation for negotiations with union and/or non-union personnel or contract negotiations with union and/or non-union in which, if held in an open meeting, may have a detrimental effect. And this is for principal contracts. To conduct strategy with respect to collective bargaining or litigation in which, if held in an open meeting, may have a detrimental effect. Collective bargaining may also be conducted. Vote to approve the MOA between Arlington School Committee and the Arlington Traffic Supervisors, AFSCME Local 680 for terms July 1st, 2017 to July 30th, 2020. Update wage increases for FY19 and FY20. And vote to improve the MOA for the the Arlington, the AAA union. So do I have a motion to go into executive session?
So move.
Second.
Second.
Any discussion? Okay, this is a roll call vote. Mr. Hayner.
Aye.
Ms. Morgan.
Yes.
Mr. Thielman.
Yes.
Mr. Schlickman.
Yes.
Yes.
There's Mr.
Yes.
Carden, and I vote yes. So we're into executive session, but we will return afterwards. Okay. Hi, we're returning from executive session. We have a couple motions.
Move to approve the memorandum of agreement with the AAA unit as presented.
May I have a second?
Second.
Okay. Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Any
aye.
opposed? Any abstentions? No, so that's unanimous.
Move to approve the memorandum of agreement with the traffic supervisors as presented.
Second?
Second.
Okay. Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, so that's unanimous, and at this point, I
Motion
think,
to adjourn.
okay,
Second. Yes.
all in favor?
Aye.
Yes.
We're done.
Great.
Thank you very much.
I won't be here.